Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1521, Killing Intent. Quentin referred to Zen's primal chaos technique when he spoke about the method Zen had used. But the truth was, Quentin couldn't cultivate this technique and there was no way Zen would hand it over just like that. So, instead of wasting his time dealing with Quentin, Zen just chose not to respond to his words. Now, he had no intention of leaving the platform at all. Quentin had made a temporary rule so that Zen could speak up. However, he didn't expect the cocky attitude from Zen and he was taken aback by the latter's insolent response to his request. Even the lady and the warriors in Quentin's entourage were dumbfounded at Zen's lack of respect towards Quentin. They couldn't comprehend what he meant and to top it all, they were stunned at his guts to stay on the platform. What do you mean? Quentin asked again, giving Zen a chance to take back what he said. But Zen had enough of this man's self-entitlement. His aura had noticeably increased, and his facial expression changed drastically as well. He chuckled, I'm surprised that you can't understand. All I am saying is I will be staying on this platform and you need to get your rears out of here right now. If you insist on staying, I have no choice but to cut your feet off. Even an idiot could easily understand the situation. There was a moment of silence on the platform. Meanwhile, those words that Zen had spoken gave his three companions quite a scare. Lone's and Kurt's eyes widened in shock. While Lucille was hyperventilating, her cheeks began to blush and her whole body was shaking. Out of these three warriors, Lucille was the most aggressive and ready to act when needed. However, she knew they had no chance of winning against these people from the Divine Land. There was nothing she could do earlier but suppress her anger. But after she heard Zen's words, she felt alive again. The valiant look on Zen's face melted her heart. Zen had not changed even after coming out of the universe. His spirit and confidence were also contagious. She could feel it radiating from his aura. Could it be that Zen had obtained another trump card? Back in the illusion battlefield, Lucille and the others had seen all of Zen's trump cards. However, this was not the universe, but the divine refinement Forbidden Land. The only warriors who could take the test were the elites of the various universes and powerhouses from the Divine Land. Was Zen confident to confront Quentin? But wait, Zen just said that he wanted to occupy this platform. Aside from Quentin, there were other experts on this platform from other universes and the Divine Land. If Zen wanted this platform all to himself, it could only mean that he was confident in dealing with everyone on this platform. But Lucille wasn't certain if her deductions were right. It would all depend on how formidable Zen's trump card was. But deep down, she was hoping that her deductions were correct. Quentin was stunned and could not react for a while. But when he came back to his senses, his handsome face gradually twisted. His eyes widened and he smirked. Ha ha ha, and suddenly, he burst into laughter like a maniac in front of Zen. His laugh echoed throughout the platform and the dozens of warriors from the Divine Land followed suit. The laughter on the platform was deafening. When the warriors from the other platforms heard the commotion, they looked over and saw Quentin and the other warriors laughing hysterically. They saw Zen being power-tripped by the other warriors and they couldn't help but pity him. However, they also knew that this was going to be a good show, a nobody versus the elite warriors. Of course, there was no doubt that the latter would win. The warriors from other platforms didn't know who Zen was and where he came from. To them, Zen was only a secondary creature who was not even qualified to challenge this group of elites from the Divine Land. Where did that guy come from? Who does he think he is? Hey, he seems to be friends with Lone. He doesn't know his place in this world. Maybe it's time that the elites bring him back to his rightful place. This idiot is out of his mind. Some warriors on the other platforms felt disgusted by Zen's confidence in challenging the elites, while others pitied him and could imagine what would happen next, him being defeated and shamed for the rest of his life. Click. Meanwhile, LaQuisha was lying on her side against the air as if she was leaning on something. She was twirling a black crystal and casually stuffed it into her mouth. Although she still felt lightheaded from being flipped by Zen, she still looked at him with fascination. She saw Zen as a rather reserved person who didn't even understand the gravity of the situation. But no matter his apparent naivety, she had never thought that Zen would have such a domineering side. It was quite appealing to her. This was an arena of rivalry between Zen and Quentin. Laquisha had wanted to teach Quentin a lesson, as this mongrel had deceived her younger sister with sweet words a long time ago. However, she never thought that things went better than she expected. Laquisha was overjoyed with the situation now. Smiles and laughter echoed throughout the platform. Nature had a way of keeping the balance in this world. Just smile. The happier you laugh, the more miserable you'll be, thought Laquisha with satisfaction. She did not bother to look at Quentin Chin, but when she heard his laughter, she felt at ease. The sound of laughter on the platform gradually subsided. The manic smile on Quentin's face completely disappeared. In an instant, his eyes were filled with hatred and his body radiated with a murderous aura. He said, "It's been a long time since I met such a daring secondary creature. It's a pity that I have to kill you." He laughed again, then abruptly stopped. Silence filled the platform and not even the wind made a sound. Then Quentin shouted, "Isaiah!" Soon after, a member of the Skyland race flew to the platform. This Skyland race man named Isaiah was the gatekeeper of Tidal Surge, and his duty was to maintain peace and order in this place. In this place, a warrior's goal was to refine more pristine life vitality from Tidal Surge, and to do that, one had to have the platform all to himself. This was the main cause of many disputes in this platform. So, the Skyland race had no choice but to send a man to guard this area. Aside from the man sent by the Skyland race, a strict rule was also implemented in this area: immediate expulsion for any warrior who would dare to create chaos in this area. As a result, no warrior dared to disrupt peace and order of this place. However, the warriors from the Divine Land were treated differently. From the moment they entered this land, they were being looked after and cared for. A Divine Land warrior like Quentin Chin would never be expelled, even if he acted against the rules. As long as he did not end one's life, the Skyland race would turn a blind eye to whatever he would do. No warrior would dare to question or harm any warrior from the Divine Land in fear of being expelled, even if it was self-defense. It was like these Divine Land warriors were untouchable in this area. Therefore, despite the disgust and anger of many warriors from other races towards Quentin's group, nobody dared to speak up or resist. It was a lose-lose situation. If they resisted and won, they would be expelled, but if they resisted and lost, they would still be expelled and be shamed for the rest of their lives. "Mr. Chin, what's the matter?" Isaiah, the Skyland race warrior, asked while his wings kept flapping as he floated in the air. "Today, blood will run in this platform. Someone would wish he wasn't born," Quentin said loudly as if sentencing Zen to die. "Mr. Chin, I hope you can reconsider. This doesn't look good." Isaiah's face was clouded with hesitation. The Skyland race was one of the 6 races guarding the sacred places for cultivation. Normally Skyland race treated all warriors considerably fair, except they would tolerate some doings of warriors from Divine Land. Nothing outrageous happened here until now. This group of warriors from the Divine Land often competed with each other, but mostly to fool around or teach others a lesson. They had never killed anyone here before. "I don't care. Go and report this to your leader. I'm sure my clan can afford the price," Quentin said coldly without even looking at Isaiah. "Yes, Mr. Chin." Isaiah wasn't an important figure within the Skyland race. And since Quentin had asked for permission, it was good enough. It was useless to report this to his leader. Anyway, he couldn't care less if these foreign warriors died. Including Collapsing Mountain race, the 6 races had hidden grudges for these warriors from other races. To them, the foreign warriors were parasites in their cultivation sacred places. The warriors from the 6 races considered these places as rightfully theirs, and the foreign warriors were slowly taking something away from them. Looking at Zen, Quentin looked devilish and ferocious. "I will let you live if you hand over that method to refine pristine life vitality and destroy your cinnabar field and path platforms by your own." Quentin already knew that Zen was a cultivator who cultivated both body and life vitality. The most essential thing for a body refiner of his current stage was the path platforms, while the most essential thing for a cultivator who cultivated life vitality was the cinnabar field. It would be a disaster for a cultivator who cultivated both body and life vitality, if both were destroyed. "Just hand it over and you'll live to see another day. Otherwise, you'll die. Once Master Chin acts, there's no way he'll stop. Your method isn't that great. Just hand it over. It's better in the hands of Master Chin." The warriors behind Quentin clamored. But none of them truly understood how bizarre Zen's method of refining the pristine life vitality was. Since Zen was considered as a secondary creature, his methods were also seen the same way. They thought Zen only had advantages on pristine life vitality refining, although his methods might be clever. They didn't know that Zen had never used any method to refine the pristine life vitality. He had refined so much pristine life vitality just by using the chaotic energy. At this moment, everyone hoped that Quentin could obtain this method from Zen. If Quentin would like to share that method with them, each of them could occupy a platform. Eventually, they could monopolize and obtain all the resources from all platforms above the tidal surge. Click. LaQuisha took another black crystal and stuffed it in her mouth as she watched the scene unveiled. She glanced at the group of idiots and shook her head in disappointment. Chapter 1522. Throwing them all into the water. What kind of expression is that? A crowd of foreign warriors from the Divine Land hadn't yet noticed LaQuisha, but her younger sister had. For reasons still unknown, her sister's expression felt quite strange to her. LaQuisha stared at her little sister and laughed dryly. "You'll understand soon enough, my little sister." "Understand what?" asked the purple-robed woman, curiously. LaQuisha didn't take the time to explain. Instead she thought to herself, if only Zen could just kill Quentin Chin, there will be no better solution. It will save us the future trouble and also cut off my innocent little sister's naive thoughts. Ever since they entered the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, these two sisters had been going at it like cats and dogs. The Qin clan was of the same level power with the Han clan, and it had been such a long time since they'd heard of Quentin's notoriety, LaQuisha included. Both the Qin and the Han clans had been married for generations. However, LaQuisha had no desire of entrusting her sister to Quentin. With so many geniuses in the Qin clan, any one of them could be considered much more reliable than this fellow. Quentin had observed Zen long enough, and noticing that he hadn't moved in a while, he decided that he had had enough. He could no longer hold himself back. As the life vitality within his entire body surged at once, the thin, long sword in his hand suddenly rose up. His killing intent had been stirred, and right now, he lacked any trace of pity. There was no stopping him. His sword was extremely fast, and as he thrust it out, it flowed forward smoothly. At the same time as his sword flung forward, the surrounding vitality between heaven and earth crazily surged together. Even the black water below the crowd was constantly rippling with energy. Whoosh! The sword flipped into an upright position and in the blink of an eye, it was already before Zen. Unfortunately, Quentin had underestimated Zen. If Quentin had been even slightly aware of Zen's strength and power, he would have never acted in such a way. Instead, he would use the supreme primordial weapon in his hand. He'd probably unleash the great wishing spell while he was at it, too. He was going to use his strongest powers to fight against Zen. Of course, if he had known about Zen's performance in the collapsing mountain race, he would have simply turned around and run in the opposite direction. How would he have chosen to fight against Zen, then? The key point was that Zen's cultivation at the Spirit Supreme Realm was too bewitching. In Quentin's current opinion, such an opponent was only a matter of a single sword attack. Even if he had only used a bit of his strength, he felt that killing Zen should be more than enough. This sort of contempt came with a hefty price tag. When this new sword appeared only a few feet before him, Zen only gently waved his hand. Two of his fingers formed what looked like a pair of scissors and his eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. In a matter of seconds, Zen's fingers had already clamped onto the blade. Without a single stop or a moment of hesitation, Zen flipped his hand and the long, thin sword broke apart in an instant. Quentin didn't even have the time to react before Zen's other hand had reached forward and clasped down on Quentin's neck. Then, with a forceful push, Zen pressed Quentin's head down onto the platform. Just like that, Zen sprinted forward still holding Quentin's handsome face down. As Zen ran, Quentin's face rubbed directly against the platform. When these platforms were built, the people of Skyland race naturally considered their resistance. Though Zen wasn't using the power of 9 stars, a shocking trail of blood was still left on the platform. The bloody wound acted like a paintbrush as it dragged a heavy, thick line across the platform. The dark red color was extremely rich. The group of warriors on the platform had originally been watching the battle with a faint smile on their faces, but now, their expressions were frozen. Everyone stood motionless, like statues. They had never thought Quentin would appear so weak when confronting this secondary creature at Spirit Supreme Realm. Zen kept Quentin's head pressed against the floor in this way until he reached the edge of the platform. A few of the warriors in the middle took a step back when they saw the building momentum. One of the warriors couldn't avoid the pair in time and was knocked right into the black water by Zen like a deflated sandbag. And just as that warrior slipped into the raging black water, Zen kicked his foot outward, and Quentin, too, was flung into the black water. This black water was all formed from life vitality. In truth, it was a life vitality sea. The life vitality sea of holy being had almost solidified, turning into everything in the world. The true sea had already disappeared. Only the Skyland race possessed this sea of life vitality, which was currently forming its own tidal surge. Although falling into the sea was not dangerous, everyone could clearly see that before Quentin tipped over into the sea of life vitality, his face was a bloody mess. The first to react was Laquisha's sister. Ever since she entered the divine refinement forbidden land and encountered Quentin by accident, he had tried to curry favor with her using all sorts of flowery words. She, for the first time, had been deeply immersed in his sweetness. Initially, Laquisha had insisted on bringing her little sister along. However, she had refused to listen to Laquisha and instead, decided to stay and cultivate within the Skyland race. Who knew that when she was halfway through her cultivation, her older sister would rush over one day and bring a man with her. This man seemed to be a secondary creature, and for a secondary creature to be so arrogant, it was only right for Quentin to teach him a lesson. After all, this woman had never experienced anything in her youth. She was immediately fascinated by Quentin, and she viewed him as her own Mr. Right. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, Quentin would be kicked into the black water in such a humiliating manner without any chance of retaliation? This girl was instantly enraged. Her dress fluttered as faint green halos of light spread out around her. She was getting ready to attack Zen. But before she could even execute her next movement, she suddenly felt her inner world sealing up. Turning her head, she saw that Laquisha was holding a rune in her hand. Anxious, Laquisha's sister's eyebrows shot up. Look. Laquisha shrugged her shoulders and pointed at the other side of the platform. When Zen kicked Quentin over into the black water, the other warriors also took the opportunity to make their moves. Almost all of these warriors came from the divine land and they had power and influence. With the influence of their families, it was easy for them to form groups. How would the others ever tolerate Zen's action, as Quentin was considered one of the top warriors in this group? But once Zen had experienced this dramatic increase in power, coupled with the massive increase in body strength, even Skyland race seemed like nothing to Zen now, let alone these spirit transformation realm warriors. If they battled against one another, the result would be tragic. Zen kept his body in motion. No matter what weapon his opponent used, he would break his opponent's attack with a finger and throw a punch out whenever a warrior got too close. Like a bolt of lightning, Zen moved with utmost speed. And once again, another weapon broke to pieces, and the warrior was kicked directly into the black water. Under the immense impact, his injuries were far from small. Just a simple move on Zen's behalf was enough to beat them. Plop, plop, plop. Following the sounds of bodies falling into the water, more than half of the warriors on the platform had disappeared in the blink of an eye. Zen had indeed kicked down 20 to 30 warriors on his own. I didn't do anything. Finally, Zen approached a fat warrior. At the man's gloomy words, Zen stopped his fist directly in front of his face. The fatty smiled innocently. When he was about to take his own action, Zen's punch suddenly exerted inexplicable force and the fatty fell into the black water, his golden axe still attached to his back disappearing into the black water along with him. That was when Zen suddenly spun himself around and swept his gaze across the remaining warriors. I'm not that cruel, and I don't really want to cut off your feet. You want to get out of here by yourself? Zen asked faintly, or should I send you off? Everyone, and everything, fell absolutely silent once again. You've proved yourself. You deserve your name. I should have thought of that long ago. Lone let out a long, hearty sigh. Lone had admitted long ago that Zen was a demon. In fact, the broken sword in his hand was actual proof of such. And yet, he could never have expected that still, even now, he was underestimating this fellow. Lucille and Kurt were ready to make their moves. However, before they could do anything at all, Zen had quickly taken care of everything going on in front of him. It was hard for the two to describe exactly how they were feeling right now. The speed at which Lucille and Kurt entered the sacred place was extremely fast. Through absorbing the pristine life vitality, they also felt that their improvement occurred at great speeds. Now that they saw the method Zen displayed, their originally somewhat swollen self-confidence was severely damaged. If Lucille's and Kurt's improvements were quick, then Zen's improvements moved at incredible rates. The two were incomparable. However, their hearts were still filled with worry. Zen currently beat this group of foreign warriors and threw them all into the water, but the Skyland race would not sit idly by. He had no power or influence in this divine refinement forbidden land. How could the Skyland race members allow Zen to behave so atrociously here? If the people of the Skyland race were to blame him, what would come of Zen? No matter how powerful he truly was, it was impossible for him to fight against the Skyland race alone, right? Together, the three of them grew more worried. And yet, they couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth. Zen's actions had finally helped them all out. Chapter 1523, Discrimination. Zen almost rolled his eyes. He wasn't interested in seizing the platform at all. While the pristine life vitality was quite mysterious as it was similar to the strength source, it was completely meaningless to him. Moreover, he didn't have any reason to help Laquisha, who had even stirred up trouble on purpose. However, Quentin had been too overbearing and had compromised Lucille and the others. Thus, Zen had no choice but to take action. Silence hung like a thick blanket on the platform, as the warriors looked on in disagreement. The tension was palpable. After all, this group of people had been quite dominant even in the Divine Land. It was simply because they thought that the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land wasn't anything special. They didn't expect that an arrogant secondary creature like Zen would be there as well. They could temporarily stop the absorption of the pristine life vitality, but they'd be humiliated if they left just like that. It was truly embarrassing to be driven away by a secondary creature, and they would become laughingstocks if this matter spread to the Divine Land in the future. Then again, they had no other choice. Now, Zen could easily defeat warriors like Quentin. Warriors of his caliber were no match for Zen at all. It wasn't long before a warrior from another race took the initiative to leave the platform with a dejected look on his face. After that, the rest of the warriors followed suit. After a blink of an eye, all the warriors on the platform were gone. The only ones left were Zen, Lucille, Kurt, Lone, and the two girls from the Han clan. "You have to leave as well," Zen muttered to Laquisha and her sister. Laquisha was stunned. "Why are you driving me away?" she said in a shaky voice. Meanwhile, Laquisha's sister cast her a helpless look. She didn't expect that the person her sister found to help her would drive her away as well. "All of this started because of you, but since I've taken this platform, I get to decide who stays behind," Zen coldly responded. "I'm not leaving," Laquisha said and pursed her lips. She didn't care about the black crystals. She only asked him to teach Quentin a lesson, and now that he was about to drive her away, she felt quite embarrassed. Lone tried to persuade Zen and said, "Zen, it doesn't matter if these two stay. The platform has enough pristine life vitality." Everyone left behind had witnessed the whole process. Although they didn't know what Laquisha and Quentin's relationship was, they had a rough guess based on the talk they had heard. The most important thing was that Lone had learned about the Han clan's position in the Divine Land through his broken sword. It was one thing for Zen to have already offended Quentin, but Laquisha seemed to have fallen in love with Zen. No matter what their relationship was, Zen couldn't offend another big clan for no reason at all. Zen is highly talented. He is a rare talent even in the Divine Land. However, his EQ is really low, so we'd better persuade him, the broken sword whispered to Lone. There was no way that Zen would allow the two sisters of the Han clan to stay with them. Just as he was about to say something to Lone, they suddenly heard a voice from the sky. "Private duels are prohibited here. Violators are expelled. Who was causing trouble here?" The booming voice echoed throughout the area as a group of people appeared in the clouds, led by Isaiah from the Skyland race. After Zen had driven away all the warriors from the Divine Land, the Skyland race finally appeared. Isaiah flew in the air before he led 6 of his clansmen onto Zen's platform. He raised a fine brow as he glared at Zen. "Who was causing trouble here? Don't you know the rules of my race?" he said in a sharp, aggressive tone. Yet, Zen just looked mockingly at Isaiah. Earlier, Isaiah knew that Quentin was about to kill Zen, but he didn't stop him. Nevertheless, he had shown up personally on the platform when he saw Zen kick Quentin and his group into the black water. In reality, he wanted to restrain Zen on the excuse of the so-called rules. It was known that Isaiah was thick-skinned enough to show his favoritism towards warriors from the Divine Land. "You knew that Quentin was going to attack me, right? Don't you remember what Quentin said to you?" Zen sneered. However, Isaiah's face remained impassive. Since the Skyland race had received a great deal of favor from the Qin clan, he naturally had to side with the warriors from the Divine Land. He thought that Zen was a secondary creature. Where did he come from anyway? At that moment, they heard a voice in the distance. "Sir, it was that guy who kicked us into black water." A martial artist from the Divine Land shouted. Those martial artists that Zen had kicked out into the black water swam and climbed onto another platform, but for some reason, Quentin couldn't be seen among them. The accusation was what Isaiah had waited for. He wouldn't listen to Zen's explanation. He then slipped into an act and said, "It really is you. Nothing can be accomplished without norms or standards. Since you've broken the rules of my race, you should leave on your own, or I'll kick you out." His words caused Lucille and the others to worry and panic internally. It wasn't an issue if they provoked those martial artists from the Divine Land because all of them were foreign martial artists. However, the people who were making everything tense were from the Skyland race, and they did so in their territory. No matter how strong Zen was, he couldn't possibly disobey the orders of the Skyland race, could he? Even if Zen had defeated these people from the Skyland race, how did he plan to fight the race's actual powerful warriors? Lone sighed in silence. He had already expected this would be the biggest problem. I knew that this guy wouldn't act so violently in the presence of the Skyland race. They shouldn't go against this group of martial artists from the Divine Land. We all know what's going to happen. Even if they win, they'll still be driven away. What's even worse is that since Zen has provoked these people, the Qin clan will hunt him down if he leaves the Skyland race. The Qin clan is powerful in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. Hushed whispers and chatters about Zen's situation were heard from the crowd. The truth was, many of them were initially happy when Zen had made his first move. After all, they had been oppressed by the group of martial artists from the Divine Land. However, they suddenly felt bitter when they saw that Zen had helped Lone and the others seize a platform. Then again, such was human nature. When they couldn't get something, they hoped that others wouldn't be able to either. Rules. Zen chuckled. So it's not a violation of rules when these martial artists from the Divine Land attacked, but I broke the rules when I tried to defend. On the other hand, Isaiah just squinted at Zen and laughed coldly. Whatever you say. He was certain that Zen wouldn't dare to pick a fight with him, so he didn't want to argue any further. If Zen fought against the warriors from the other races, he would be expelled from the Skyland race. If he dared to fight against the Skyland race, it would result in his possible death. Therefore, Isaiah was confident that Zen wouldn't be that stupid to fight him. After all, this was the territory of the Skyland race. I wonder which idiot set such lousy rules. Zen slowly walked towards Isaiah as he spoke, and then continued, "I'm not an idiot, so I won't abide by the rules." With every step Zen took, the killing intent in his fiery eyes grew stronger. Isaiah was a bit flustered at this unexpected outcome. Would Zen really dare to fight him? Isaiah wasn't exceptionally strong in the Skyland race and was merely on par with the Spirit Transformation Realm martial artists. He had been hiding, and when he witnessed Zen's divine might just now, he knew that he was no match for Zen. Thus, he quickly decided to rely on the Skyland race. But he never thought that Zen wasn't afraid of the Skyland race at all. Everyone in the Skyland race already knew about the Collapsing Mountain race's visit, but due to the strict hierarchy within the race, they didn't know that Zen also came along with the Collapsing Mountain race, nor did they know that Zen was the flame-proof warrior. Isaiah was even more unaware that Zen had humiliated Caden, the head of the Skyland race, yesterday. It was because Isaiah wasn't a significant figure in the Skyland race. Why would Zen be afraid of him then? Zen got closer to Isaiah, and his aura became more powerful. Panic started to show on Isaiah's face while two of the Skyland race's clansmen began to retreat. This is the Skyland race. Whoever doesn't follow the rules will. Isaiah stuttered. The truth was, he wasn't confident enough and he was full of regret. If he had known that this would happen, he would have asked the elders to come. I will be expelled, right? You have repeated that several times, Zen said with a smile. Then let's see if you have the ability to do so. As soon as Zen had finished speaking, he immediately sped up and made the first move. These warriors of the Skyland race previously came to the platform in all their arrogant glory, but now they fled away in panic like a flock of disturbed birds. However, Isaiah couldn't escape since he was the group's leader. His eyes widened in horror as Zen forcefully gripped his collar and smashed him onto the platform. Chapter 1524, Roy. Black life vitality gushed out of the Skyland warriors as they rushed into the sky, condensing into black javelins and shooting towards Zen. The life vitality that the Skyland warriors were using seemed to remain at a visualization level. But they were putting this skill to its maximum use. These javelins were sharp, but they weren't enough to injure Zen. The black javelins rained down upon Zen. At the sudden attacks, Zen clenched his fists that began to emit a blinding light, at which the javelins exploded into smithereens with the thundering sounds. Seeing that Isaiah was about to resist his powers, Zen flew towards him, grabbed his wings, and pulled Isaiah to stand before him like a shield for protection. The group of Skyland warriors didn't dare throw their javelins now that Isaiah was directly in the line of fire. They glared at Zen before they started cursing him to no end. No one dares make a move in our race. Put Isaiah down. This is a capital offense in our race. It's not too late for you to just kneel and beg for mercy. We do not like to kill. Of course, you might still survive if we gouge out your eyes and put you in the dungeon for 100 years. Either way, you have to suffer the torment. So don't make any mistakes. Zen rolled his eyes at this. The Skyland race was not cultured and developed so well, and Zen wondered where they had learned these words. These reckless and rude remarks had rendered Zen speechless and annoyed. These threats might have been effective on anyone else, but to Zen, they were mere jokes. They're right, let go of me and you will still have a chance to live. But if you don't, no one can save you. The Skyland race controls this place, so you should behave yourself, Isaiah said coldly. The Skyland warriors were arrogant, so he had felt utterly humiliated when Zen had grabbed his wings, which was a huge taboo in the Skyland race. Isaiah really wanted to beat Zen to death. But he didn't dare behave recklessly since Zen was controlling him at the moment. Really, I just want to see who has the right and the guts to take my life, Zen said with a smile. Noticing that their threats had no effect, the Skyland warriors in the sky exchanged glances before finally deciding to call for reinforcements. Lucille and the others were upset and worried. How would Zen be able to deal with the mighty masters of the Skyland race when they arrived on the scene? But when they saw that Zen was still looking calmly, hope bubbled up in their hearts. Was it possible that he had other cards up his sleeve? It was not long before a new group of Skyland warriors arrived. When they found Isaiah trapped in Zen's hands, they merely stood guard in the air. Calm and composed. Gradually, more and more Skyland warriors gathered in the sky, but not one of them recognized Zen. They thought of Zen as some kind of a reckless warrior. A loud sound rent the air, causing everyone's ears to go numb. A figure emerged, leaving a trail of light in the sky as it charged straight towards Zen. Let go of my son. The man roared with rage and flapped his wings. A blood-red spear appeared in his hands, one that he had created through his visualization. He thrust it towards Zen, the action dripping with fury. Zen could have used Isaiah as a shield, but he didn't. Instead, he began to activate his power, a calm expression on his face. Zen had already figured out the opponent's strength, and he knew that he was one of the top warriors of the Skyland race. It was also possible that he was qualified to join the Divinity Hunt squad if he was in the Collapsing Mountain race. Zen's physical body and the power of the path platforms were not enough to withstand the attack. As Zen pointed at his opponent, an invisible force appeared on his fingertip. A power drawn out of the 9 stars. His fingertips touched the tip of the spear. The opponent paled as he felt an irresistible force emanating from the tip of the spear. It became difficult for him to grasp the spear with both hands. As the long spear left his hand, it disintegrated into streams of life vitality in the air. The warriors of the Skyland race were stunned. The Skyland warriors had gone back to call for reinforcements when Zen had captured Isaiah. Even though Zen had caused such a ruckus, they hadn't gone to inform the senior leaders of the Skyland race. They felt that it was not necessary for their senior leaders to deal with a nobody like Zen. One of them went to inform Isaiah's father, Roy, who was one of the elders of the Skyland race. Roy was so powerful that his strength was considered to be one of the top 10 of the Skyland race. They had waited a long time before they had finally managed to get Isaiah's father to come. And now, they all felt that this farce was about to end. Zen would finally receive the severest punishment of the Skyland race. Everyone was just expecting to watch a good show. But they hadn't expected Zen to stand his ground and fight. What was more, he had directly attacked Roy's spear. He eventually broke the spear that Roy had created through his imagination. They suddenly realized that they had heavily underestimated Zen. They wondered who had sent Zen to cause trouble for the Skyland race. And why had Zen barged into the territory of the Skyland race so brazenly? He was absolutely crazy and reckless. No matter how strong he was, he would be no match for the top warriors of the Skyland race. Besides, there was no point in causing trouble there. As an elder of the Skyland race, Roy should have been present when the Collapsing Mountain warriors had come to visit yesterday. But recently, the Chin clan had sent him a copy of the mysterious transformation technique. The comprehension of life vitality in this cultivation method had refreshed him and he chose to cultivate in seclusion for a month. That was why he had never seen Zen before. Brat, tell me your name. I'll let you die a little faster. Roy was furious at the sight of his son immobile in Zen's arms, his wings trapped. Zen sighed. The collapsing mountain warriors were much kinder than the Skyland warriors. While the Skyland warriors were beautiful to look at, they were arrogant and domineering. Both the races had been formed in the divine refinement forbidden land, but why were the members of the two races so different? Zen did not answer and Roy lost his patience. He waved both his hands, and streams of black life vitality surged out of his body, twisting into mysterious patterns. Each strand of life vitality turned into a peculiar mystical crystal that revolved around him. The crystals were flawless, and they even contained great momentum. They continued to come together, combining to form a huge array. As a martial artist below them saw this, he muttered, "The shadow godly way." The Skyland warriors couldn't become godly geniuses, but they could cultivate the techniques of the 3,000 godly ways. The cultivation methods that the Skyland warriors practiced were passed down from the divine land. Most of them had been given by the Han clan and the Qin clan, which was why disciples of the two clans always got special treatment and care in the Skyland race. Once the warrior had finished talking, he slapped his head and shouted, "Run!" All the martial artists from other races felt that something bad was about to happen. Roy's full strength was on par with that of a supreme lord. Moreover, the power of the life vitality covered a vast area. If they stayed here, they would inevitably be injured. So all the warriors rose into the air, wanting to avoid injury. But at this precise moment, a large group of Skyland warriors rushed over. One of them said, "Roy, stop." The voice came from far away, but it was transmitted through the life vitality and resounded in everyone's ears. Roy was furious and no one could persuade him to stop. But there was one person who could make Roy listen to him, Caden, the head of the Skyland race. "Sir." Roy glared indignantly at Zen. He could let him live a while longer, but he would definitely kill him sometime. Lone, Kurt, and Lucille were even more worried as they saw that all the senior leaders of the Skyland race were gathered here. They were afraid that Zen might not be able to escape his doom this time. They might also be punished, and that wasn't a thought they were fond of. With Caden in the lead, this group of warriors, including Chapman and other collapsing mountain warriors, landed on the platform. Almost everyone, except Laquisha, now thought that Zen was about to receive a severe punishment. Even Roy had the exact same thought. However, Caden's next words confused Roy to no end. "Zen, why didn't you inform me before going to cultivate in the tidal surge? Why did you cause such a commotion?" Caden asked calmly. Roy was puzzled and surprised. He could not figure out who Zen was and why their head was so respectful to him. He wasn't the only one who was shocked. Even Isaiah, who Zen had captured, was stunned as he exchanged glances with his father. Chapter 15:25, Admit. At Caden's question, Zen snorted and threw Isaiah several dozens of feet away. "What absurd rules you have in the Skyland race. You should ask him what has happened." Zen growled. He had used the hidden strength he possessed when he threw the boy on the ground. Isaiah tried to soar into the sky, but as he made a move to stand, his legs buckled under him and he fell on his back once more. "How dare you?" Isaiah's father, Roy, growled when he saw his son be thrown like a dead dog. He started to march towards Zen when he heard Caden's cold commanding voice. "Roy," the leader said. Roy was no fool. He knew Caden very well and he knew the man would only act like this in front of a person with remarkable background. Just who was this Zen guy, really? Surely, being a flame-proof warrior wasn't enough to earn the respect of Caden, was it? As far as he knew, warriors of the 6 great races in the entire divine refinement forbidden land did not act polite towards martial artists from other races. This was, after all, the territory of the 6 great races. Even someone like Quentin would have to pay a price in order to gain the Skyland race's favor. He was curious as to where Zen came from. "Isaiah," Caden turned to the boy after he had gotten up. "Tell us what happened. How did you offend our esteemed guest?" When they heard Caden refer to Zen as an esteemed guest, Roy, Isaiah, and everyone else's hearts began to sink. Even the warriors from the divine land were stunned. This group of warriors from the divine land had been trying to gain the Skyland race's favor for years now, and not a single one of them had come close to being an esteemed guest. How could Zen, a mere secondary creature, be called an esteemed guest? They were all astonished. Lucille, Kurt, and Lone, who were standing behind Zen, looked at each other in shock. Before, they had been worried the Skyland race would take revenge on Zen. But now, that worry had vanished into thin air. This was Caden, the leader of the Skyland race, speaking. What in the world did Zen do to make the Skyland race's leader treat him so nicely? Lucille couldn't help but sigh. She had worked hard to enter the Skyland race within a certain time period in order to absorb as much pristine life vitality as she could. She had always felt fortunate that she was fast and lucky enough, but seeing Zen now, the achievements she worked so hard to attain felt nothing but a joke. Back in the illusion battlefield, Lucille had been defeated by Zen. And perhaps she had been unwilling to accept the result at the time because they were all godly geniuses and there was always a chance to improve their strength. In the future, who could say for sure who would beat who? But now, after seeing what just happened, Lucille was absolutely positive that Zen was indeed stronger than her. The same thoughts ran through Kurt's and Lone's heads. How could Isaiah tell the truth? After he was thrown out by Zen, blood and adrenaline surged through his veins and the tide in his inner world surged. Right now, he felt extremely uncomfortable, and being put in the spot by their leader was not helping at all. "Sir," he immediately said, "I was just acting according to the rules of the race forbidding martial artists from fighting. Zen and the others were fighting for the territory of the tidal surge. I was only doing my duty to stop him and expel him from the Skyland race. I didn't expect him to start attacking me." Hearing his son's argument, Roy turned to their leader and pointed to Zen with an accusing finger. "My son is only following the race's rules, so he wasn't at fault. Sir, I hope you will uphold justice and punish this fellow as is written in the law." Caden frowned. He didn't believe Isaiah's words for even a second, but he had to hear all sides of the story. "Our respected friend Zen," he said. "Is what Isaiah said true?" All the martial artists present had witnessed what happened between the two and knew Isaiah was lying. They also felt that Caden would be more willing to believe Zen over Isaiah, perhaps it was because he didn't want to offend Zen. Ultimately, they knew that if Zen were to explain himself, then neither Roy nor Isaiah would be able to do anything to him. Zen turned to Isaiah and laughed, a slight air of arrogance radiating from him. "He's right, it's exactly as Isaiah says. I wonder how you are going to deal with this." Once again, everyone was stunned as Zen openly admitted to Isaiah's lies so easily. Is he serious? Why did he play along with Isaiah's lie instead of telling the truth? What is he thinking? In their opinion, Zen had done nothing wrong. It was no secret that Isaiah was biased towards the martial artists of the Divine Land. In fact, everyone, even Caden, was aware of this. And some of the rules were even set by Caden. Caden was always well informed. How could he not know that Isaiah was lying? In this tidal surge, there weren't a lot of excitement that could happen, so it wasn't difficult to figure out the whole thing. Caden asked Zen for his side because he wanted him to defend himself and give his reasons for his action. Then, everyone would have a way out of the situation. He would punish Isaiah for appearance's sake and the matter would be settled. He didn't think Zen would not defend himself and instead second Isaiah's statement. "Elena, did you see that?" LaQuisha suddenly said to the woman beside her. "This man is 1,000 times better than that Quentin. I just want you to see that there are a lot of good men in the world. That Quentin is a clown." The woman in purple was Elena Hahn, LaQuisha's younger sister. She had momentarily forgotten her conflict with her sister as she looked at the scene with confusion. Why did he play along with what Isaiah has said? LaQuisha only smiled. "Because he doesn't care." "Doesn't care about what?" Elena Hahn asked again, not getting what her sister meant. "He doesn't care whether he's justified or not, so it doesn't matter if he tells what really happened or not. No matter what happens, he knows Caden will let him go," LaQuisha explained. "This so-called justice is only a line that the powerful ones draw for the weak ones. The weak ones are confined by the line while the strong ones ignore it." Compared to her sister, Elena Hahn was simple-minded. She was, after all, still a young girl fantasizing about love and romance. However, while she didn't understand everything that LaQuisha had said, she got something from it, and now she looked at the young man with fresh eyes. Simply put, Zen was making it clear to Isaiah that he was bullying him and he was disobeying the rules. Isaiah couldn't do anything to Zen after all. When he heard Zen's answer, Caden wished for lightning to strike Zen as soon as he stepped out of the place. This fellow was determined to make things difficult for him. "How dare you?" Roy bellowed. "Since you admit it, it's clear you hold no value for your life. Perhaps you'd want me to end it for you." Roy didn't think too much about what was coming out of his mouth. Zen admitting to it was him courting death, and Roy was only willing to send him on his way. Roy's outburst, however, only caused more trouble for Caden as he was looking for an excuse to let Zen go. It would be best if he could both keep the rules of the Skyland race and not cause discomfort for Zen. He was well aware that Zen was not a person to be trifled with. And yet, Roy kept adding fuel to the flame. "Roy," Caden said, his expression dark. "Take your son and leave tidal surge." "Why?" Roy asked in disbelief. No matter what, he was still an elder of the Skyland race. "Roy, the leader asked you to leave, so it's best to do what he says." If you have anything to say, you can say it later, someone spoke up. Seeing several elders wink at him, it dawned on Roy that the matter wasn't simple. Gritting his teeth, he turned around and glared at Zen. And if looks could kill, Zen would be dead already. With a last sneer, he grabbed his son and flew away. But even Roy and Isaiah had left, Caden was still in a dilemma. He even wanted to grit his teeth and turn away to leave all the awkwardness behind. Fortunately, there just wasn't a lack of calculating eyes in this world. "Sir," a warrior from another race suddenly jumped up and called. "I witnessed the entirety of what just happened here, and it was definitely because Quentin provoked first that Zen fought back in anger." Isaiah was partial towards Quentin, which led to the conflict with Zen. As he listened to the man explain, Caden couldn't help but nod and relax his expression. "So that's how it is. Isaiah was at fault and our respected friend Zen has been wronged. I'll be sure to deal with Isaiah later." Zen decided to let the matter drop. From the beginning, Caden had been on his side and was trying hard to accommodate his every need. Besides, Caden had nothing to do with this. If Zen continued to cause trouble for the man, it would be too much already. As the commotion ended, Caden was ready to leave. However, Caden thought of something and turned to the man from the crowd and asked for his name. "Harun Han, sir." The warrior cupped his fists and replied happily. The warriors of other races cultivating in the title surge, however, looked disappointed. They had all witnessed the scuffle, but only Harun Han had spoken up to help Caden. This person would definitely be given special treatment in the future when he cultivated in the Skyland race. Caden was about to lead the people in the area to leave when suddenly, the black water started to surge. Chapter 1526, The Sky Pearl. Zen had defeated many warriors as he kicked them into the black water earlier. After they fell into the water, most of them moved to other platforms. However, there was someone who never appeared again. It was Quentin, the first warrior to fall into the water. Quentin was known for his vicious personality. A warrior like him who came from a powerful clan would prioritize his reputation above anything else. He suffered tremendously with his battle against Zen. Humiliation enveloped him after Zen pressed his face to the ground. A great grudge formed in Quentin as he vowed to murder Zen for revenge. The black water surged violently. Some of the warriors were surprised and shouted, "The tide is coming again. Everyone, get ready to refine it." Their shouts echoed as everyone braced themselves for another chance to loot. There were only 7 tidal surges a day, and each one was an incomparably precious chance for the warriors to collect valuable resources. Since they had finally entered this place, they naturally wouldn't miss a single opportunity to obtain the rare resources here. They would risk their lives in order to harvest everything they could. However, some of the warriors felt puzzled as they gazed upon the water's surface. When the tide came, the water's surface should have risen evenly. But then, only the water at one side of the central platform surged. "It doesn't seem to be a tidal surge. Watch out, there's something in the black water." The black water swirled as its center began to sink. A massive whirlpool suddenly appeared as if a monster opened its mouth to suck the water and everything around it. The whirlpool was so deep that its center was over 10 feet below its edge. Splash! The air in the middle of the whirlpool grew faster and more vicious. Suddenly, a tornado was formed in the center of the whirlpool. The violent wind rose straight into the sky. Above it stood the warrior Quentin. His face was bloody and mangled because of the injuries he suffered when he had been pressed against the ground by Zen. The wounds were so deep that some parts of his face revealed eerie white bones. A murderous expression painted his face which, coupled with his damaged appearance, made him look almost like a demon from hell. What happened? Caden, who was about to leave, became curious about the commotion. He turned around and recognized the person above the tornado. The young man from the Chin clan. He asked with a vigilant gaze upon Quentin. "He looks pretty angry. I'm afraid he's going to fight to the death. Do you want me to stop him?" A warrior beside Caden asked with a fearless tone. However, Caden waved his hand and shook his head as he dismissed the warrior's query. "Let's just take a look." At the moment, Caden still only knew very little about Zen's true strength. However, since the boy could block his fire serpent without any sign of struggle, Caden concluded that Zen indeed had the qualifications to join the Divinity Hunt squad of the Collapsing Mountain race, which granted him the equal status as an elder of the Skyland race. Quentin was only at the spirit transformation realm. If Zen indeed had such strength, Quentin wouldn't be a match for him. On the other hand, Caden believed that it was a good opportunity to inspect Zen's strength when Quentin attacked him out of anger. Of course, Quentin was in danger of getting beaten up even worse if Zen was truly stronger than him. The Chin clan would definitely question the Skyland race if Caden allowed such an event, but Caden didn't care at all. All of the 6 great sacred places for cultivation had their own pride. They were at the divine refinement forbidden land, and they were always the ones who were begged to by others. Dear gods, please listen to my dearest wish. I swear on the cost of my own life, as well as the demon in my heart, that I shall trample all obstacles in front of me and end this worthless man's life. Let your powers flow through my supreme primordial weapon, which will heed my every command. Quentin, who was high in the sky, shouted and began to chant the wishing spell with a determined voice. The chant echoed and was heard by the warriors below. The wishing spell was one of the 3,000 godly ways, and it was also the most widespread one. The use of the wishing spell wouldn't conflict with the other godly ways a warrior used. On the contrary, it was always the last straw for every warrior. In the face of a life or death crisis, the wishing spell could increase a warrior's strength by several times. Even though Kenan was only a world lord, he had managed to seal the formless sky python for a short while with the help of the wishing spell. Of course, there were pros and cons to everything. The more advantages one obtained, the greater the restrictions were. This was the principle of equivalent exchange. If one could not defeat the enemies after chanting the wishing spell, then he or she would have to carry out the unfulfilled wish in his or her remaining lifetime. If the wish remained unfulfilled, it would be impossible for them to improve their cultivation. Even though Kenan and Woodrow had managed to save Laquisha that day, they did not have the strength to kill the formless sky python. Their failure would have detrimental effects on their cultivation, but for the sake of the princess, they were willing to pay such a price. As for Quentin, he gave no attention to the negative consequences as he was already swallowed by his rage. After the wishing spell was cast, a supreme primordial weapon that dangled on his chest was activated successfully. It was a grayish pearl, which looked almost like a drop of water. Power radiated through its translucent and round appearance. Aru! The moment the pearl was activated, a loud and clear voice echoed through the sky. All the members of the Skyland race on the top towers heard that voice. Anxiety appeared on their faces, including Caden and the elders of the Skyland race. Their fears originated from their innate instincts. No matter how powerful they were, terror still enveloped their bodies. Cold sweat trickled down their spine as they watched carefully at the sky. The blood of several legendary birds flowed within the blood of the members of the Skyland race. Quentin's pearl, however, contained the blood essence of the heaven duck, which was a true spirit in the divine land and could be called the lord of all birds. They were no match for the most powerful legendary bird. Countless formidable birds roamed the endless deep space of the divine land. There were legendary beasts like the roc and the phoenix, but without a doubt, the lord of all the birds was the heaven duck. It was at the top of the pyramid among all birds. As the cry of the heaven duck reverberated from the sky, the members of the Skyland race felt an intense suppression. All of them had unpleasant expressions on their faces. A mix of shock and fear reflected in their eyes. However, none of the warriors of the collapsing mountain race, as well as those of other races, had such a feeling. The pearl on Quentin's chest was called the Sky Pearl. As a supreme primordial weapon, it could be only used once. Needless to say, it was a rare and precious treasure. Quentin felt powerless during his last fight against Zen. Zen's physical strength alone was not something that he could withstand. However, thanks to his prestigious clan, Quentin still had many tricks up his sleeve. When he had been given the Sky Pearl, he was reminded repeatedly by his family members that only in desperate times could he use the Sky Pearl. Even to the Qin clan, the Sky Pearl was a rare and precious treasure, at least not something they could use casually. At that moment, Zen thought about taking Quentin's life. If only Quentin could swallow his pride and back down quietly, Zen would have let him live. It was a pity that Quentin had an impulsive temperament. Under the humiliation, his judgment became clouded with revenge as he only wanted to kill Zen as soon as possible. He didn't notice that even Caden and Chapman had to retreat when they confronted Zen. With the long cry of the legendary bird, the Sky Pearl suddenly burst apart, and a drop of chalcedony flowed out from it. It was as if a drop of green ink was dropped into water, and the chalcedony turned into flows of green liquid that diffused outward and shot into the center of Quentin's brows. Instantly, a green light covered his entire body. The aura around him strengthened 100-fold. Power radiated from him as he became several times more powerful. It was not the aura of Quentin himself, but the aura of a true spirit. Goodness, it looks like Quentin is going to go all out. Laquisha's face was painted with shock and caution. Zen, you have to be careful. Laquisha realized that she had somehow overdone it this time. She understood Quentin's spiteful personality, but she never expected that he would use the Sky Pearl. That precious treasure was allowed to be used only in life or death circumstances, and even Laquisha knew of this. She thought that even if Zen had taught this fellow a good lesson, he hadn't shown any killing intent and would not force Quentin into such a desperate situation. However, she still underestimated Quentin's pride. As he was humiliated like that, he could do anything out of revenge without any thought to the consequences. Zen, remember that you are just a secondary creature. It's useless no matter how strong you are. You are never qualified to fight me. Now let me show you how power is truly defined. Quentin laughed maniacally as he spread open his arms and pounced towards Zen, like a rock spreading its wings. Hatred painted his face as his murderous gaze laid upon Zen. Instead of fear, surprise was seen at Zen's face when he noticed Quentin's sudden burst of power. He now understood that the resources and treasures in the divine land truly defied his logic and imagination. With Zen's current strength, Quentin actually didn't have the qualifications to fight him. The only outcome of their fight should have been the same as before, where Zen would press him on the ground and humiliate him. However, after Quentin used the Sky Pearl, his strength had increased tremendously. He was probably much stronger than Kennen, who used the wishing spell as well. And to think that he was only at the spirit transformation realm. His newfound power made him even more prideful. Zen had never heard of such a sudden power-up from his universe. The warriors and the treasures in the divine land were truly unfamiliar to Zen. He never thought that the warriors in this plane was capable of such a feat. Of course, this was also because of Quentin's special position. Ordinary warriors in the divine land would not possess such powerful treasures like the Sky Pearl. The other warriors who were beaten by Zen earlier once again revealed smiles on their faces. They knew that Zen had utterly infuriated Quentin. The consequences of being that target of this madman's rage would be disastrous. They were relieved when they saw that the Skyland race did not take any action to protect Zen. Although Zen had displayed outstanding strength before, they believed that he would not stand a chance against Quentin, who had used his secret weapon. But once again, Zen did something out of their expectations. He did not choose to retreat. His face reflected no fear as he continued to stand dignified and brave. Then, he activated all the power of his 9 divine stars as he jumped from the ground and charged toward Quentin. When Caden saw Zen's actions, he chuckled and said, "This guy. I bet that he just doesn't want to destroy the platform." Chapter 15:27, The Shield of Power. Zen wasn't actually afraid of the platform smashing beneath his feet. What Zen did know though, was that his current strength was completely reliant on the strength of the 9 divine stars. In other words, it wasn't suitable for long-distance battles. If Quentin had relied on his nimble movements to attack him from a long distance, Zen would most likely be taken advantage of and it would be difficult for him to fight back. Instead though, Quentin had chosen to use the Sky Pearl, which appeared to be some kind of treasure for strengthening himself. That was a good thing, to say the least. Quentin recklessly pounced toward Zen, and Zen thought that the item was exactly what he hoped it would be. Zen was unaware though that Quentin was simultaneously having these same thoughts. Quentin knew that this Sky Pearl could easily give himself a massive boost in a short period of time, whether it be in strength or speed. With this extra boost, he at the spirit transformation realm, would have the strength to fight against a top-level world lord. There were no masters like a supreme lord in the divine land, and any world lords could find ways to condense their own godly tile. Speaking of such, there were actually plenty of ways to obtain a godly tile. It was for that reason, and rightfully so, that Quentin was equally afraid that Zen would slip away, or seek the protection of the Skyland race. That Sky Pearl only lasted for about 2 minutes, which was relatively short. Once Zen succeeded in dodging the aura emitting from the pearl, his strength would begin plummeting and his chances for making a comeback would be completely over. Upon noticing that Zen had no intentions in avoiding him or his attack, Quentin was overjoyed. "Seeing as you're in such a hurry to die, don't blame me for this," Quentin said. Other than this trace of happiness, Quentin felt unresigned deep inside his heart. What kind of secondary creature was he dealing with? In the past, these secondary creatures were existences whose lives could be taken by him at any moment. They were not worth mentioning. In fact, there were quite a few secondary creatures in the Qin clan's teleporting area. In Quentin's opinion, these lower creatures could fight each other to death just to win a few trial tallies. However, they weren't qualified to battle him in any way. And now, this specific secondary creature standing before him was forcing Quentin to not only use his full strength, but use the Great Wishing Spell as well. And he even took out the Sky Pearl in order to attempt beating him. Not much remained within Quentin now. Aside from his unwillingness and helplessness, Quentin was bursting with fierce intent to kill. The only way he would ever feel satisfied, the only way he would ever feel pleasure again was if he succeeded in killing Zen. The moment the two of them got close to each other, Quentin clenched his teeth and the green light emanating from his open hands immediately condensed into a pair of claw shadows, almost like a hologram. Those sharp claws were streaked with lines. These lines were actually divine textures, having evolved from true spirit and were the finest of all. These textures could be passed along to the next generation via blood lineage. Die! Quentin shouted angrily, staring at Zen. Throughout his entire life, very rare were situations like these, where he had to fight with his life on the line. After all, there were plenty of crises that he had never had a chance to intervene in. To his opposite though, Zen was grinning, portraying an indifferent smile. The power extracted from the 9 divine stars was now accumulating in front of Zen. The powerful force continuously twisted the air and caused a visual distortion for anyone looking directly at Zen. To them, it looked like it was Zen's body that was strangely misshapen in that way, twisting like a contortionist, or as if he was standing in front of a distortion mirror. No one could completely comprehend exactly what they were looking at. It definitely was nothing to be laughed at though. Everyone at present took this strange, distorted scene very seriously. Before this, Zen, as a warrior in the Spirit Supreme realm, surpassed everyone on the platform to the extent that no one could compete with him. Now, it was far beyond anyone's comprehension how he had thrown so many warriors from the divine land into the black water. Zen's powers once again began to rise suddenly and sharply. No one could predict what limit he'd reach this time. This time, Zen turned the invisible force into a shield and held it in front of him. He then rammed it into Quentin, who was pushed back with such force he flew into the air. Through his transparent power shield, one could see Zen's lips parted, revealing a bright, malicious smile. Quentin only had the time to catch a glimpse of his expression before the sharp green claws wrapped around his hands collided directly into the shield. Quentin's pair of green light claws were condensed by the blood essence of the heaven duck. Such a creature's claws could literally slice through near anything. Even the collapsing mountain race's most sturdy magic golden stone could be cut in half by a set of claws like these. In the divine refinement forbidden land, Quentin thought, there probably wasn't any material his terrifyingly sharp claws couldn't slice through. Unfortunately for Quentin, he couldn't have been more wrong. When Zen used the shield formed by 9 divine stars, it wasn't a material object at all. It was only an invisible power. Generally speaking, the power could only be exerted to the extreme by means of media transmission. And, the most common medium still remained to be a fighter's own body and fists. A few of the body refiners equally used large hammers and battle axes. These weapons could also be considered a form of medium. The power of holy being mastered by Zen was much too strong for him. With Zen's current strength, no matter what medium he used, there was no way he would ever be capable of withstanding such great force. Choosing to use his body to bear it was not a good idea, his physical self would disintegrate. Even a supreme primordial weapon would break inch by inch. Therefore, all he could do now was to unleash his power by the means of the cross-world theurgy. Using a technique such as this one was a complete waste, but Zen was acting desperate, out of helplessness. Otherwise, it would be the same situation as he experienced before in which he lit up too many dragon scales and couldn't be capable of using them. Even Zen just released the power without the help of any medium, it was actually more than enough to fight against Quentin. Gar. At the same time that the green light claws reached the invisible shield, the intertwining power of the 2 incomparable attacks collided and emitted a sharp slicing noise. Formless power could be compared to flowing water. If any piece of it was sliced or cut open, the power wouldn't be wasted but instead replenished. Due to such, the cutting force coming from the sharp claws was unable to destroy the invisible shield. On the contrary, as Zen continued to drive the shield forward, the sharp claws began to disappear, now being swallowed up whole. Although it felt much longer, this entire process took no more than 2 seconds. Quentin's expression quickly darkened. He watched as the tips of his sharp claws began to bend in all directions and cracks began to appear on their surface. "This is impossible," Quentin shouted. By using the sky pearl, his confidence soared upward and he suddenly felt like he was invincible. Throughout several different occasions, if a warrior's strength was greatly enhanced in a short period of time, this kind of illusion would appear in their minds. For example, the warriors in the collapsing mountain race who passed their trials would experience a sudden increase in their overall confidence when they just left the cultivation sacred place. When this occurred, many warriors had a tendency of overestimating their newly found strength. And, overestimating their strength often caused them to lose all sense of caution, resulting in the selection of the wrong opponent. The latter was the case with Quentin. If he had been more observant and had used an unyielding mindset, he would have chosen to retreat a little, ensure for some time and then crawl up to Zen, giving him a fatal blow at the right time. And that would have been his only chance against Zen, his only means in successfully killing Zen. Instead though, arrogance and prejudice had taken over him, making him lose his focus. His timing was off, and Quentin attacked Zen at the wrong moment. Sizzle, 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 the powerful force contained within the shield was fully released and the force contained within ultimately shattered Quentin's sharp claws into green powder, even finer than dust. And while his claws were bursting into puffs of dust, the green light that had once enveloped his body exploded like a bubble, disappearing into thin air and leaving no trace of itself behind. Through the use of the most overbearing method, Zen had successfully and forcefully broken the Sky Pearl. "You can't," Quentin muttered. That now destroyed Sky Pearl was Quentin's spirit, the Qin clan disciples' last resort. In the past, countless Qin clan disciples had used this very same tactic to reverse the many life and death battles, and had been the creators of many miracles. Zen had broken the Sky Pearl with ease, however, Quentin's mental support was now another issue. Quentin had been toyed with by Zen before and right now, in this very moment, he felt as though all his fighter spirit had completely disappeared. Fear had replaced it and filled him instead. Throughout this entire process, this entire battle, never had he imagined that he could die. Now though, he suddenly realized that he was about to face the god of death. No one could ever understand the fear he felt in his heart. "You can't kill me," Quentin subconsciously uttered these words to himself. Quentin opened his mouth again, with the intentions of making Zen understand the stakes of which he now faced, but there was no time. Zen had already crashed into him at full force. And yet, there was truly no need for Quentin to speak. Zen could have guessed what he was going to say before he even opened his mouth to say it. He had come head-on with such conversations countless times throughout his journey in the past. This time, he didn't even bother giving Quentin the chance. The very moment Zen's shield collided with Quentin, its formless energy had begun annihilating his body. Under ordinary circumstances, the warrior's body would be instantly obliterated by the powerful energy. Whether it was his hair, skin, bones, or organs, they would all be utterly destroyed. What happened in the next instant though was far from what Zen had expected at all. All of a sudden, the brown wooden ring wrapped around Quentin's finger broke off. Simultaneously, a burst of smoke rose from the surface of Quentin's skin, a smoke that slowly enveloped his entire body. From the midst of the smoke, an intense space law power was transmitted over and Quentin's entire figure disappeared in the blink of an eye, magically replaced by that of a wooden puppet. This puppet-like creation was vivid and lifelike. It looked exactly like Quentin in figure and form, but Zen knew better. It definitely wasn't him. Zen equally crushed the puppet into pieces by using his shield and the pieces too, fell to the ground. Zen looked around and sneered, nose high in the air. He was done here. He returned to the platform. At the time of battle, there were many different treasures that Quentin could have used to protect his body. Just before his death, he had used such a substitute treasure. Not only could a puppet be used to replace his physical body, but it could also be used to teleport through space. Chapter 1528. Shocking Qin City. There was a teleporting area at the southern hills of the Central Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. About 15% of the warriors were transported there whenever they entered the area. When the teleporting area was occupied by the Qin clan, the name of the area was immediately changed to Qin City. Afterward, the Qin clan sent their world lords into the city and gradually conquered the location. A bright white light suddenly appeared and shone across the center of the sky of Qin City. The light was actually a result of the scattered space law. As the space theurgy passed down through the divine land, it created a very stable and nearly perfect space channel. As the incandescent white space law interwebbed ceaselessly, a large snowflake was formed. The snowflake rotated midair a few times until suddenly, somebody fell straight out of the snowflake. A world lord within the fortress saw the person and rushed quickly into the sky. When the world lord finally reached the person who was still in the middle of the fall, the world lord delivered a surprise and gasped. "Young master, who had the guts to do this to you? Were you suddenly attacked by powerful beasts in the wilderness?" the world lord asked. There was no doubt that the person who fell was Quentin. However, the front of his body had his flesh ripped apart and mangled. A huge gash was seen on his chest that one could see the eerie bones within it. The corrosion from Zen's shield also morbidly damaged Quentin's left hand. A ring made from cyan wood was seen on the little finger of his left hand. It was an escape ring. The escape ring could replace his body with a wooden puppet the moment he encountered danger. Simultaneously, it would also teleport him elsewhere. If he was in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, the escape ring would be able to teleport Quentin back to Qin City. The World Lord carried Quentin all the way into the fort. The arrival of Quentin in such a miserable state alarmed everyone in their path. What happened? How is the young master? How can he be severely injured? Who did this to him? I'm sure the injuries are not caused by a blunt weapon. It must have been caused by some kind of erosion. The people delivered their concerns with voices full of panic. The World Lords knew that swift actions were needed to save Quentin. Immediately, another World Lord set up a grand formation and activated the divine texture. Afterward, streaks of jade green light were infused into Quentin's body. The warriors continuously fought in the divine land. As long as a warrior still had a breath of air in them, then no matter how serious their injuries were, they could still be revived. The horrible wounds on Quentin's body started to heal. Countless muscles grew and intertwined with each other. Afterward, his skin began to cover up the newly formed muscles and not even a scar was found. Quentin then slowly opened his eyes. Exhaustion reflected on his face. The World Lords immediately noticed how weak he still was even after his regeneration process. Young master, what kind of beast did this to you? A World Lord asked curiously. These World Lords stayed in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land all year round. Therefore, warriors wouldn't attack for no reason in the 6 great sacred places. Moreover, the young master was in the territory of the Skyland race. Qin clan went there frequently and they had a close relationship with Skyland race. Most people believed that the young master had been injured by a strange and powerful beast during his training. When he heard the World Lord's query, Quentin's face darkened. My injuries weren't caused by a beast. Quentin's voice was still weak, yet disappointment flowed in his tone as he clenched his teeth. Not a beast. The World Lord who asked was surprised by Quentin's answer. He wondered what or who could have been responsible for Quentin's serious injuries. Could it be that he had a fight with the Skyland race? The World Lord was taken aback by his thought. Dang it, I was injured by a secondary creature. Quentin answered with a voice full of rage. That was a shameful situation for Quentin. The fact that he still lost to Zen even after he used his Sky Pearl showed that there was no hope of him to ever overpower Zen. Quentin could try 1,000,000 times again but he would still experience defeat against Zen in a match of power. However, he still refused to agree that Zen possessed stronger strength and technique. A secondary creature? How is that possible? The World Lord asked with eyes widened with disbelief. Young master, are you sure of what you're saying? A voice echoed from the people. They were still surprised that someone was able to do such a thing to their young master. Even more so, they found it hard to believe that the one responsible for Quentin's injuries was a mere secondary creature. The people were aware of the strength of secondary creatures. There were many secondary creatures in Qin City. Additionally, as the Qin clan occupied the teleporting area, they were also responsible for the distribution of the trial tallies. They knew that these secondary creatures fought until their heads bled for some low-level trial tallies. The fact that their young master had actually been injured by a secondary creature was totally unbelievable. I even used the Great Wishing Spell. Quentin stuttered. Humiliation started to sink to his soul. The World Lords were even more shocked. If Quentin was injured like this even after he used the Great Wishing Spell, then the secondary creature's origin was definitely something to worry about. What about Hayes and Mac? Did they not protect you, young master? A World Lord asked in anger as if he wanted to blame those he just named. 2 guards were appointed to Quentin when he entered the Skyland race. Their responsibilities were to protect their young master at all cost but they failed to carry out their duties as their young master had been severely injured. However, the 2 guards did not enter the tidal surge. They figured that with Quentin's strength, there was no need to accompany him in that place. I even used the Sky Pearl, Quentin added with a regretful voice. He tried to be as honest as could be, perhaps in an attempt to cover up the embarrassment of his defeat to a secondary creature. What? Is this true, young master? The World Lords present were startled. Most of them couldn't comprehend the reality of the situation. Quentin's cultivation might not be as high as theirs, but after he displayed his Great Wishing Spell, his strength should be several times higher than theirs. No World Lord would be a match with Quentin if he was powered up with the help of his Wishing Spell. But he even used the Sky Pearl. With such a secret and powerful treasure supporting him, the young master's strength should be far above any World Lord present. The problem for the World Lords was that Quentin had used the Sky Pearl and was still defeated. He had also activated the escape ring to save his life. The strength of the secondary creature that defeated Quentin was truly at a level that they could not comprehend. They could not believe that such an incident really happened. As he noticed their expressions, Quentin's rage grew even worse. Don't you believe me? he asked with an angry voice. We have no right to question you, young master. However, please understand that this situation is very hard for us to believe. A world lord lowered his head and responded with an apologetic tone. No matter who the strange creature is, we have to go to the Skyland race to capture this person. We must make sure that the young master fulfills his vow, another world lord said like a politician who offered a solution to a problem. Quentin lost to Zen even though he activated his great wishing spell for the demise of Zen. If Quentin did not kill him, then in the future, Quentin's cultivation would not be able to progress. Therefore, regardless of who the other party was, Quentin should kill the secondary creature that he vowed to murder. There's no need to hurry. This person's origin is quite problematic. Even the Skyland race is protecting him. I'm afraid that we will not be able to capture him so easily, Quentin said with a frown. His rash use of the Great Wishing spell had created a hidden danger for him. A gamble was made, but there was still hope if he could just murder Zen. Normally, once a warrior used the Great Wishing spell, they would only end up in a situation where they would not stop until they died. They only had to kill the other party to avoid the backlash from the Great Wishing spell. The Skyland race protects a secondary creature. It was only then that the Qin clan's warriors realized the gravity of the problem. The Qin clan could do anything they wanted in the divine refinement forbidden land, but they still had to behave themselves in front of the 6 great cultivation sacred places. After all, they were the owner of this area, so they could only curry favors with them. After Quentin's quick escape from the tidal surge, the members of the Skyland race and collapsing mountain race left. Zen landed back on the platform. At that moment, the black water below the platform started to move again and a second tide current finally appeared. Splash! The water flowed harshly through the tide. Then, the whirlpools began to converge towards the platforms. The warriors who watched the fight were surprised by the sudden rise of the tide. In response, they immediately turned their attention to their feet. No matter how strong Zen was, it didn't matter to them. Everyone still diligently wanted to refine their pristine life vitality. The group of warriors from the divine land that had been driven off the platform by Zen earlier now occupied their respective positions on the other platforms. Some warriors from other races did not dare to confront the warriors from the divine land since they were not as powerful as Zen. They understood that they should shut their mouths and pray that the warriors from the divine land would leave them alone. At the central platform, Zen no longer chased Laquisha and Elena away. He wasn't even fazed with his fight with Quentin. As for Lucille and the other two, they stayed on the platform to refine the pristine life vitality with Zen. Lucille, Kurt, and Lone were extremely excited. Their smiles reflected their glee and enthusiasm. The largest platform was somewhere Lucille, Kurt and Lone had never dared to set foot in before. Finally, they were able to refine the pristine life vitality here. Moreover, not only did they stand up on this platform, but all of the other warriors from the divine land had been driven away by Zen. The largest platform belonged to them now. They never imagined that they would be so lucky. The black crystals were continuously refined through the divine texture under their feet. Each warrior had managed to refine quite a few black crystals. Zen only infused a small amount of chaotic energy into the divine texture this time, since these black crystals were of no use to him. He just wanted to do Lucille and the others a favor. As such, Lucille and the other two already obtained more than 1,000 black crystals in such a short span of time. Their expression was a mix of delight and surprise. Previously, they had only refined a few black crystals, and there were less than 100 crystals per day. However, with the help of Zen, each refinement they made was almost equivalent to the sum of the black crystals refined in the last 3 months. The 3 of them were extremely excited. The precious pristine life vitality was constantly being swallowed up by them and continued to add fuel to the fire for their inner worlds. The concentration of life vitality in their bodies increased so fast that the results were visible to the eyes. While a warrior was moving through the Soul Sea realm, the Spirit Supreme realm, and the Spirit Transformation realm, their inner worlds were continuously experiencing changes. As one's inner world developed and expanded, one's cultivation would also steadily improve. At this rate, he or she would be able to break through to the Spirit Transformation realm in just a few days. After they absorbed the pristine life vitality, the 3 of them gathered around Zen, curious to hear more about his experiences along the way. Their faces were decorated with delightful smiles and eager eyes. Zen briefly recounted the details of what happened in the collapsing mountain race. Even though Zen had missed out on many details and hid some information from the 3 of them, they were still dazzled by what they heard. They continued to listen to Zen's discussion with curious minds, eager for knowledge and improvement. Chapter 1529, The Trustee. Zen and the others were on the platform, casually chatting about the knowledge of the divine refinement forbidden land. And at the same time, they were refining the pristine life vitality. After Lucille and the others were teleported to this land, things were not easy for them. And they would go all out for a purple trial tally. Lone, on the other hand, nearly died in the whole process. When the surrounding warriors on the platforms observed their crystals of pristine life vitality quickly piled up like a small mountain, their faces were full of envy. But they could only go as far as envy Zen's godlike strength. Who would dare to provoke him? Moreover, from the attitude of the Skyland race, this fellow seemed to be respected even by Caden. Everyone couldn't guess the reason, but that wasn't important. What mattered most was that no one dared to fight with him. Soon, Zen prepared to leave and did not stay there for long. Zen had also keenly observed the crystals of pristine life vitality. They seemed to be relatively special but quite similar to the life vitality crystals. But the structure was completely different. Unfortunately, after Zen absorbed these black crystals into his body, they simply could not fuse with the chaotic energy and were quickly devoured by the chaos. With this, there was no need for him to stay here for a long time. So when Zen left the tidal surge, he went to see Caden. He told him to keep the platform for his friends. Since this was a simple request for Caden, he eagerly agreed. Some of the warriors from the Divine Land created a dramatic scene as soon as Zen had left. They deemed themselves as powerhouses and were ready to take over the central platform again. But a group of people from the Skyland race soon arrived, announcing that the central platform was reserved for Zen. The central platform was at Lucille and the other two's disposal. This was a request personally made by Zen in consideration of the 10 people from the universe who came to the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. The Skyland race was the most important sacred place for cultivation. And the others would fight to enter this place as well, so they would be able to share it with the 3 of them. And that kind of request was very predictable. 3 days later, Carl and Xenia entered the Skyland race exactly when Zen was still cultivating on top of a pagoda. As secondary creatures, they successfully entered the tidal surge after they had paid the trial tally. However, they did not encounter Zen. Compared to the others, their luck was a little lacking. It had taken them a lot of time to obtain the purple trial tally. In fact, it wasn't easy to obtain a purple trial tally in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. Some warriors could spend several years, or even several decades, and this only proved that these 10 people were top 10 warriors in the entire universe, the cream of the crop. The 2 of them gained entry at the tidal surge, and just like Zen, they had no idea how to cultivate in this place. The warriors on the platform also ignored them as they wanted to inquire about the situation. When they wanted to climb onto a platform, they would be chased away by the warriors on the platform. The place was packed with people who had already entered the platform and were resisting the newcomers. Carl was so calm about the entire situation, while Xenia had nearly fought with someone. But she was still stopped by Carl knowing they had just arrived here. Before they managed to understand the rules, it was indeed unsuitable for them to have a dispute with someone. With traces of hostility showing on their faces, the warriors standing on the other platforms watched them closely. They even sneered at the 2 of them for being ignorant. At any rate, any warrior who had newly entered the tidal surge would have to take this initial step. However, at the time Zen entered this place, LaQuisha led him directly to the central platform, creating a ruckus. Just as the 2 of them were hesitating, they suddenly heard someone shout, "Xenia!" They quickly turned their heads, scanning the platform not far away, only to see 3 people standing on it. It was Lucille, Kurt and Lone. What struck them was that only 3 of them were on the platform. Comparing the other platforms with fully packed people against the empty platform, Carl and Xenia suddenly felt very strange. However, they were overjoyed to be able to encounter such old friends here. Thus, the 2 of them flew toward the platform without qualms. "Lucille, why is such a big platform monopolized by you?" Xenia asked in bewilderment. Perhaps she still hadn't figured out the rules of this place, but with Xenia's keen senses, she knew that there were some extraordinary resources on these platforms. Therefore, those warriors from other races weren't willing to share them with her. However, there were only 3 people on this vast platform. That alone was odd and at the same time, extraordinary. Lucille clearly understood why Xenia was acting so strange. She merely gave a faint smile and said, "It is all thanks to Zen." Zen? Xenia's eyes widened in surprise. She immediately scanned the area before she asked, "Where is he?" Lone shook his head as he recounted the entire process of how the 3 of them obtained the platform. Finally, he said, "I'm afraid that fellow has no interest in the pristine life vitality here." I wonder if he has left the Skyland race yet. Xenia was astonished to hear this. A lot of talents filled this cultivation sacred place. There were not only geniuses from the universes gathered here, but there were even some who came from the divine land. Yet, that fellow was still able to stand out amongst them and obtain such benefits for them. Zen paved the road for them. After the tide surged, Xenia and Carl now finally and truly understood what it meant to have obtained such a big platform. Zen, on the other hand, did not leave the Skyland race. For the past few days, he stayed within the Skyland race, patiently waiting for the arrival of the Harmony race. During his idle time, Zen continued to keenly observe the inner world. In the beginning, the 9 stars looked incredibly dim after Zen drew their power from them. The strength source could not be overdrawn indefinitely. For ordinary body refiners, after they opened up the 9 divine stars and used up all of the power, they would still need a long time to nurture and sustain 9 stars to their peak state. And most often than not, it might take a few months to achieve their peak state. Therefore, after they cultivated to the extreme, body refiners would have a huge weakness, their combat power could not be sustained. Because no one could directly convert life vitality into pure strength. Chaotic energy was like a cure-all since the chaos was the root of everything, as everything was derived from it. The 9 stars actually hung above the chaotic sea, but were nourished by the said chaotic energy. Through these 9 stars, the recovery speed of the power was something that other warriors, and even the Holy Being, were beyond compare. The Holy Being constructed the universe, but the universe did not contain chaotic energy. Hence, the Holy Being would not absorb the chaotic energy, for his use. When he had trained the primal chaos technique to this point, Zen now encountered a serious problem. He did not know how to expand his inner world. The creatures within the inner world were still rapidly growing. One after another, dynasties passed. Creatures of all kinds and different types of divine weapons were born, and the scene was full of vigor and vitality. The size of the chaotic sea was slowly shrinking, but the continent situated in the middle was constantly expanding. Seriously, the problem was that the entire chaotic sea did not increase in size. If he wanted to cultivate his life vitality, Zen could have stayed in the Skyland race to absorb the black crystals, and try to expand his inner world. The size of the inner world was also a measure of one's cultivation level. If Zen were unable to expand his inner world even further, then he would lose any means of raising his cultivation level. Since Zen was unfortunately unable to find the answer within the primal chaos technique, he had to explore. A path that others had never taken was destined to have too many risks and uncertainties, but it would also yield astonishing harvests and unexpected results. In addition to exploring the inner world, Zen also needed to deal with the 2 sisters from Han clan. Although this woman had taken advantage of him once, Laquisha still knew when to advance and when to retreat. However, her little sister was quite different. Her sister was an ignorant little girl who kept pestering him with lots of questions. She even asked Zen which universe did he come from. I also don't know which universe I come from. Zen didn't know much about the powers in the divine land, nor was he aware what the universe was named. Perhaps, Roche and Master Feng knew a bit, and yet they were hiding something from him. Who was the trustee? Elena suddenly asked. What is a trustee? Zen naturally didn't know what she meant. Elena showed off arrogantly. So you don't even know what a trustee is? The universe is indeed a backward place. Elena, Laquisha felt her sister's words were a bit rude. However, Zen waved his hand dismissively and said, it doesn't matter. I wonder if the person you're referring to is the one who controls the heavens. At this time, Zen's interest was piqued. He understood that there was some vital information he needed to grasp himself. The 2 girls weren't scheming people, so he naturally needed to seize this opportunity to learn a thing or two. And because of this probing, Zen had a new understanding of the entire divine land. Chapter 1530, Evolutionary Universe. Even though her sister rebuked her, Elena was not the slightest bit afraid of her. She continued, the entire universe is under the control of the Holy Being. What right do the others have to be called a controller? After hearing Elena's explanation, Zen finally understood. Since the universe was the inner world of a Holy Being, then it stood to reason that the Holy Being was the master of the universe. This logic was quite very obvious and easy to follow. But he was not certain as to what kind of role Irene played. Just like what Elena said, was Irene really a so-called trustee? Trustee, what is that? Zen asked again, his brows furrowing in confusion. At his question, Elena blinked a few times. Her eyes were a little round and watery, and they notably lacked the charming yet lonely quality of Laquisha's beautiful orbs. It was natural for a young girl at her age to have fervent adoration for the strong. Others might be curious and have questions and doubts about Zen's origins, but his past and his strength didn't matter to her, as long as he would not do anything to provoke her. On the other hand, Laquisha was a bit more mature than Elena. She was more inclined to use Zen for her own advantage and use him to complete her agendas, such as entering the soul-suppressing cliff or even attacking Quentin. But Elena's indifference toward Zen might change once she became interested in him. The moment that happened, she would definitely dig up everything she could about him. Then, tell me, who is the controller of heavens you were speaking of? Elena asked, waiting for his answer. Zen hesitated, unable to answer right away. In truth, he knew nothing about that person, except her name. Drawing a deep breath, he answered, it is Irene Zhang. Ha, it is her, the trustee that the Zhang clan had sent. Elena said, her lips curving into a wide smile. A flash of satisfaction passed over Laquisha's eyes at the revelation. She was evidently pleased to know more about Zen. Zen watched their reactions and realized that they probably knew a secret he didn't know of. What? That is the evolutionary universe, Elena informed. Evolutionary universe, Zen said slowly, testing the way it rolled off with his tongue. Was this the name of the universe he was in? Elena looked at Zen with doubts clouding her face, and said, but the holy being who built the evolutionary universe seemed to be caught in a bad situation. We think he's already dead. Elena, what are you talking about? Laquisha said quickly, interrupting her sister. She clarified, the holy being and the universe are interdependent. If the universe is still there, the holy being can't be dead. Yes, the holy being is about to die. Didn't they say that they were ready to take action? If the evolutionary universe is destroyed and broken up, then won't that mean that the holy being will die as well? Elena continued. Hearing the sincerity in Elena's words, Zen became certain that they weren't lying. It was indeed true that the universe was in danger and facing the invasion of the sacred race. Furthermore, Rocher had once informed him that the master of the universe was on the verge of death. Strictly speaking, Zen as well as his companions was born because the universe was trying to save itself in the face of the crisis. Their fate was to lead the great world of chaos. According to Rocher, their destiny had been sealed and preordained the moment they were born. As Zen had been cultivating all this time, it was unavoidable to run into some accidents. For instance, entering the fairy palace had been an accident. He also had another accident when he obtained the primal chaos technique. However, despite these accidents, his path was still the same as before. Including the guidance of the 9 genuine dragons and the fact that Yan was taken away, these facts had made up his resolve and helped him move forward. The ultimate and final goal was to get Zen to go to the divine land and save everything. Of course, it was impossible for the entire universe to place its hopes on just one person, so a batch of geniuses were born to share Zen's burden. As countless geniuses fought in the illusion battlefield, 10 chosen people would then carry an irresistible destiny on their shoulders as they moved forward. Zen could deduce as much based on the limited information available to him. However, he still had more questions lingering in his mind. Is this a struggle between holy beings? Laquisha, who was standing beside him, nodded her head. Of course, but the outcome of this battle has already been decided. Now, it can't be considered as a struggle anymore, but the end of it instead. The master of the evolutionary universe has lost irrevocably. Zen seemed to be in deep thought. Since this is a battle between holy beings, why doesn't the winner just shatter the universe? With the strength and might of a holy being, it should be possible, right? Zen asked, becoming even more curious. Elena answered with a smile, that's not possible. The divine land isn't like what you think at all. The Hall of Holy Beings will never agree to it. Hall of Holy Beings. Zen trailed off, his forehead creasing in confusion. What is that? I've never heard of that. Elena immediately realized the extent of Zen's lack of knowledge when it came to the divine land. Drawing a deep breath, she decided to be patient and explain everything he needed to know. She was being so accommodating and patient because she wanted to show off in front of him. You don't even know this. Here, let me explain in detail. The divine land, I'm afraid, is very different from what you imagined. Zen had seen many civilizations along the way. The demon knight had an absolute and strict divine system. The 3 queens ruled over everything and they were revered as the gods of the demon knight. Because of this, they were able to use the pools of faith. The ordinary sacred places were run and organized by the long-established sect system, and they were formed according to strength. Whether it was a 6th grade sacred place or a 10th grade one, the difference in their strength was significant. However, the rules and culture of these sacred places were not really different from a low-grade sect. This was the primitive and old system. Other than the sacred places, there was also the Divine Kingdom. In Divine Kingdom, the imperial family was the sole ruler and all the large and small forces depended on it. With this type of civilization, only the monarch and their clan stood at the height of power. Only the outstanding disciples in their clan could inherit the best legacies and heritage. And in the vast divine land, countless years had gone by. These countless years were reminiscent of the day that the world was created and the chaos was cleaved apart by the creating axe. Here, time had become a foreign concept, a concept that ordinary people found difficult to comprehend. After all, time was one of the rules and regulations they established, and for a very long period of time, the time of the entire divine land had not been created yet. That was the reason why time was still at that moment. It was also the explanation why the divine land had been living in a state of deathly stillness for a long stretch of time. By the time the concept of time was created, the divine land had already gone through countless years. The scale of time was unimaginably long and had become an illusory noun. In the ancient times, countless creatures and races constantly died and gave birth to the country of mortals and by extension, their sects. As the strength of the sect warriors increased exponentially, these sects soon managed to surpass the mortal nations, gradually becoming sacred places and later on becoming divine kingdoms. It was quite similar with the universe, where different races and creatures found it difficult to interact with each other. In the countless years that passed, the divine land had been embroiled in fatal and chaotic wars. The casualties were innumerable and beyond counting. Some races had been eliminated in the blink of an eye while some races that had tens of billions of clansmen were deemed not qualified enough to leave a mark in the history of the divine land. They were like mere waves in the ocean, disappearing into the whirlpool of history in just a flash, as if they hadn't existed. They were mere specks of dust in the vast land. The races that were able to make it out alive in the chaos, however, were all very proud to have survived the bloodbath. They were no doubt the most powerful and resilient races. Endless wars only brought ravaging destruction and total annihilation. With the development of civilization, people eventually came together to put an end to the long period of war and death. As a result, many holy beings joined hands and formed the Hall of Holy Beings. They were given the highest authority in the entire divine land as they were entrusted to keep the peace all throughout the lands. The appearance of the Hall of Holy Beings eventually stabilized the entire divine land, heralding a new era of peace among the people, and it had persisted until now. But despite its existence, the battles between races, warriors, even the holy beings had not completely stopped. To avoid repeating the same mistakes, their skirmishes were confined to the rules. Anyone who would break the rules would surely face the wrath and punishment of the Hall. The whole process was filled with plots and traps. The master of the evolutionary universe and his disciples must have fallen into a trap and received their punishment in the end, but the things involved are very complicated and cannot be explained in just a short time. Moreover, there are many rumors circulating around that may not be true, Lucretia cut in. Elena glared at her sister, pissed that her sister interrupted her at the most crucial moment. What is the name of the master of the evolutionary universe? Zen asked, completely immersed in the information they were providing him with. Curiosity was eating him up. He knew that the holy being had built this universe and had also seen Win, one of the holy being's disciples, who was hiding in the celestial position. Unfortunately, he knew nothing about this holy being. The master of the evolutionary universe is called Mike Luo. He has the same last name as you, Lucretia replied with indifference. What? Zen exclaimed in surprise. Lucretia's answer made his blood boil. Excited, he took deep erratic breaths, his heart hammering so loud in his rib cage that it felt like the girls from the Han clan could hear his heartbeat clearly. Chapter 1531. Zen's reflection. No other names that Lucretia said would have shocked Zen more. The master of evolutionary universe where Zen lived was called Mike Luo, who was also a holy being living in the divine land. For a moment, Zen's mind went blank. He just could not think. Maybe it is just a coincidence, he mused. Although the name Mike Luo was not common, it wasn't a rare name either. However, it was not very rational to see it as a coincidence. Earlier also Roche and the others had kept many information from him. Did they also conceal these secrets from him too? There was also the issue of his own fate. At that time, Zen displayed great talent, compared with the warriors in Great World. But if one were to look at the entire universe, then Zen, with his low cultivation level at that time, was nothing compared to the warriors of the universe. So, why did that young man appear abruptly and abduct Yan? Was it because she was the fate pointer? All these thoughts were running across Zen's mind. Maybe all this was just a fabricated excuse. To be more specific, his fate was to make him advance towards the divine land. As he went through all these thoughts, Zen could understand the situation more clearly. If one were to assume that the young man was a true God who could descend upon the universe at his will, then he had to be a disciple of the holy being. But no ordinary true God could return to the universe. In Zen's eye, the only true God was one of celestial position, one of the holy being's disciples. When his own strength was merely in the virtual tribulation realm, he was under the care of this disciple whose strength was equal to a true God's. Coincidentally, his father who died was called Mike Luo and the name of the holy being also was Mike Luo. With this deduction, nothing that happened so far was a coincidence after all. If his father really was the creator of the universe, then Mike would be an omnipotent existence in the inner world. He turned into a nature creature and gave birth to a Luo clan in a certain corner of the universe. Then Mike had cultivated Zen until he grew up. In the end, Mike promptly arranged for some tragedy to ensure his death. His hatred would be a motivation for Zen to grow up faster. With these never-ending thoughts, Zen's breath became heavier. There were also other evidences supporting these facts that Zen knew about. After Zen had used his soul to attack the little monster of the York Divine Kingdom, he had directly taken over the will of the great world by devouring his soul. The outcome came so naturally, as if the will of this great world had always belonged to him. There were only few people who studied the will of the world, so Zen couldn't find any reference. That was why he didn't consider it to be weird. On the contrary, he had thought that it made sense. Now after careful deliberation, he realized that perhaps his ability to inherit the will of the great world was related to Mike. Zen thought about his encounter with luck-devouring snakes when he was going through, passing the torch. An enormous figure had suddenly appeared, ripping the luck-devouring snakes into shreds and devouring them. These things could not be mere coincidences. The appearance of the enormous figure was quite baffling. Back then Zen didn't even have the ability to fight the snakes. It was as if there was an invisible guardian god behind him that appeared during crucial moments, protecting and allowing him to successfully pass through. However, he was not protected all the time. At least, it did not happen when Zen had been through several life and death situations. Perhaps the formless guardian god wanted to strengthen his will that time. Of course, all these thoughts were just Zen's assumptions. However, the possibility of these hypotheses being true was quite high. All that was remaining for Zen to do was to personally confirm it. When he realized that his father did not die after all, Zen was going through a mix of emotions. After all, according to both Roche and Laquisha, the creator of evolutionary universe was on the verge of death. Even if it was proved that the holy being was the same person as Zen's father, he would have to shoulder the heavy burden. In all probability, this heavy burden would have fallen on Zen's shoulder from the moment he was born. Something that Mike was likely to arrange. Under the turmoil of various thoughts in his mind, he collapsed into silence for a long time. Zen, Zen, Laquisha called out a few times, but Zen remained silent. He just stared into the distance. Elena stretched out and waved her hand in front of Zen a few times. Seeing no reaction, she asked, "Sister, has he lost his mind?" Laquisha shook her head. In her eyes, Zen's state of mind was extremely strong, and he didn't show panic even in life and death situations. The problem must be the name of the master of evolutionary universe. Since the two of them had the same surname and Zen's talent was so remarkable, could it be that they were father and son? This idea did not seem reasonable though. If Zen was really the son of a holy being, how could he be just a secondary creature? Which holy emperor would place their children in the universe to cultivate? The secondary creature had lots of inbred defects. The laws they comprehended were only of the holy being. The world they came into contact with was only a world created out of life vitality. They first had to comprehend the godly way and become a true god before gaining the qualifications to walk in the divine land. These gaps were difficult to bridge after one was born and had lived for a long time. From a different perspective, any creature in the inner world of any warrior could be considered as child of this warrior. Zen suddenly brushed Elena's hand aside. He then flew and landed on a tall tower in the distance. Elena was hurt by Zen's gesture and sulking. She looked at her sister. Laquisha did not feel bad for Elena. Her younger sister possessed a sensitive personality. She was still trying to understand the ways of the world. Humph, even if Mike is his father, what is the need to be so agitated? Elena said unhappily. In the end, you are not him. And that is what matters. If our father was killed by the people from the Hall of Holy Beings, and all the disciples of our Han clan were to be hunted down, how would you feel? Laquisha asked. Elena merely shrugged her shoulders, not knowing what to say. The Hall of Holy Beings was an efficient organization. Each holy being had their own rights. Under normal circumstances, it was unlikely for holy beings to attack each other. Back then, they had secretly joined hands to kill Mike, the holy being of evolutionary universe. For a moment, everyone had their own opinions and reasons to kill Mike. However, the real reason had never surfaced. Perhaps the father of the two sisters knew about this, but it was impossible to discuss such a grave matter with the two little girls in Han clan who were yet to become true gods. The divine refinement forbidden land was extremely large. Even though one could see the ceiling of the cave from here, this cave was still as wide as several supreme worlds combined. Gazing into the distance, Zen was struggling to remain calm. With this emotional turmoil going on, it seemed like a difficult task to accomplish. Previously, he had come across many mysteries, but the recent information was like a sharp knife, cutting through all the doubts in his heart. He might be after all a creature that had been deliberately created. Zen still remembered his father's words. That Mike might be the real Mike's incarnation, but it couldn't be counted as his father in the strict sense. Zen also had an incarnation when he stepped into his inner world. That was not his original body, but it still executed at his will. He had poured all of his feelings into the body. He was still his father. Even if he was created deliberately, he would have to repay this debt of gratitude. If he had to save Mike, would he also have to face the vast power of the Hall of Holy Beings? Compared to a holy being, he looked so insignificant that he could be easily ignored. Evolutionary universe was about to be wiped out by sacred race. Since Mike had already sent him to this stage, Zen had to continue with the rest of the journey and accomplish the task at hand. This road was destined to be arduous, but Zen was not afraid. His eyes shone with excitement. He stayed in the Skyland race for 2 more days, then proceeded ahead. Along the way, he visited the tidal surge for a while and met Xenia and Carl. Out of the 10 godly geniuses, Zen knew that 6 of them had appeared within the Skyland race. He didn't know which cultivation sacred place the remaining 4 were currently in, especially Margaret. Zen was still a bit concerned. This woman was impulsive and willful, and he hoped she would complete the training in divine refinement forbidden land. 2 days later, the Harmony race, the one who controlled the mind refining tower, finally arrived at Skyland race. Compared to the Skyland race, this Harmony race had a very ugly appearance. Their bodies were covered with snake-like scales, and their nose bridge was abnormally high. Their eyes were shaped like triangles, hanging upside down on their faces. If their behavior had not been exceptionally good, Zen would have treated them like beasts. Although this race had a very ugly appearance, Zen realized that they were a kind and optimistic race, who were much easier to deal with than the Skyland race. Chapter 1532, Cold Flame Poison. The Harmony race controlled the mind-refining tower, which was a sacred place for cultivating one's state of mind. Perhaps it was because the mental states of the warriors in the Harmony race were stable and any traits of cruelty could not be found in them, that they were able to maintain a calm and indifferent attitude at all times. In other words, it was easy to get along with them. Now that the 3 great races had gathered together, it was time to set out. The Collapsing Mountain race and the Harmony race had arranged for the strongest elites from their races to arrive at the place. The Skyland race was also prepared. Besides the elites of the 3 races, a few warriors from other races were also willing to practice with them. As the second day dawned, clouds dispersed in the skies, and they began to head in the northern direction of the divine refinement forbidden land. The Han clan too had sent out warriors from their clan. Along with Kenan and some others, more than 20 world lords from the Han clan had arrived. Laquisha and Elena too were present as they set out with the 3 great races. For the 3 great races, this was undoubtedly an important exploration. No one knew of the means through which the Han clan had convinced the 3 races to let the warriors of their own clan join them. The attitude of the 3 great races toward the other warriors varied greatly. The Collapsing Mountain warriors were the most domineering. They acknowledged the status of the strong warriors alone, which was why it was possible for Pascal, a warrior from another race, to qualify to be their leader. However, even though Pascal had once been the leader of the Collapsing Mountain race, it did not mean that they would give any special treatment to the Han clan. After all, it was only Pascal among them who was strong enough. The Harmony race got along well with other races. They did not care much for the backgrounds of the warriors. Whether it was the secondary creatures or the martial artists from the Divine Land, they held them all in equal respect. As for the Skyland race, they cared for the exchange of benefits. It was their race that had made the decision to allow the Han clan to explore along with the 3 great races. As they headed toward the north from the base of the Skyland race, many towers were seen along the way. They walked for about 10 miles when the densely packed towers disappeared altogether. They had left the territory of the Skyland race. A clear boundary appeared before them. On one side of the boundary were calm black waters, but the waters ended abruptly at the boundary, as if someone had drawn a decisive line on the ground to demarcate the area. On the other side of the boundary was a vast expanse of ice field. The snow and ice land stretched all the way to the end of the world. Stop. All along, it was the Skyland race that had led the way. They walked in front. At this moment, the leader of the Skyland race, Caden, suddenly raised his hand and everyone immediately stopped in their tracks. Zen felt it to be strange as well. He had seen many strange things in the divine refinement forbidden land. Although the scene in front of him was a sight to behold, it was relatively ordinary. However, Caden's expression was one of caution. They were, after all, the aboriginals of the divine refinement forbidden land. There was reason behind their caution. They had probably learned lessons here that they paid for in blood. Following Caden's orders, some warriors of the Skyland race pulled out blood-red fruits and began distributing them. The cold flame field is a land of extreme chillness. Once you enter it, you will suffer cold flame poison. These gold sun fruits will help you to resist it. However, this place is also where you can practice. The deeper one goes, the stronger the cold flame poison becomes. If martial artists from other races want to comprehend the profound mysteries of the ice law, this is the best place for you to do so. The surface of the blood-red fruit was covered with dense lines that emitted a scarlet glow, as if magma flowed within it. A member of the Skyland race flew over to Zen's side and threw him a fruit. As he caught the seemingly juicy fruit, he immediately felt its scorching heat in his hand. He felt the burning sensation seep through him. As the other martial artists caught their respective fruits, they tossed it from one hand to the other in panic, finally wrapping them in life vitality before stuffing them into their space rings. When the crowd first heard of the cold flame poison, they did not think much of it. After all, the majority of the martial artists present were at the peak of the spirit transformation realm. They were not concerned about the danger of the land of extreme chillness. "Elena, you should wear this first," Laquisha said, fishing out a gown embroidered with fiery clouds and handing it over to Elena. The Han clan had operated in the divine refinement forbidden land for many years, so they were very knowledgeable on the layout of the divine refinement forbidden land. They knew how horrible the cold flame field was. It could be said that the master of the divine refinement forbidden land had recorded all of his comprehension of the ice law on this cold flame field. Holy beings were proficient in all laws and it was impossible for them to overlook anything when creating a universe. However, the master of the divine refinement forbidden land specialized in ice law and had his own comprehension of it, so the cold flame field could not be underestimated. Laquisha put the gown on Elena and then walked over to Zen, reminding him in a low voice, since they want to cross the cold flame field, their destination would be the interior world of the divine refinement forbidden land. I don't know what they want you to get for them, but I must remind you to be careful and not push yourself too hard. Your safety must always come first. Zen nodded in understanding. The collapsing mountain race had shown him respect and he too had agreed to their request. Naturally, he would do as he had promised. However, the precondition for him helping them out was that his safety was guaranteed. If Zen were to be in a desperate situation, it would be impossible for him to risk his life in order to help them. Since both sides were taking advantage of each other, they profited from equivalent exchange. Zen was not merely being realistic. The pressure he was shouldering currently was unprecedentedly heavy. The fate of the evolutionary universe alone was enough to give him a headache, not to mention the fact that he needed to enter the divine land in future. In other words, Zen's life was more precious than the others in front of him. He could not die here. Otherwise, it would just be irresponsible of him. The interior world, what is that? Zen asked as he heard the unfamiliar term. Laquisha continued to speak through her life vitality. The divine refinement forbidden land is divided into exterior and interior worlds. Everything you see, including this enormous cave, is only the exterior world. The interior world is the core of the divine refinement forbidden land. The Han clan had sent out many of their warriors into the divine refinement forbidden land previously. Staying at this place for so many years, they had a much better understanding of the divine refinement forbidden land than other common warriors. As the princess of the Han clan, Laquisha had the natural advantage of being more aware of their current circumstances. Except for warriors who wanted to comprehend the ice law, there were very few who would go to the cold flame field. However, the cold flame field was a land of death for ordinary warriors from other races. Without the Skyland race's gold sun fruits, they would have been severely injured by the cold flame poison in no time. As for the warriors from the Divine Land, they could straightaway comprehend the complete ice law on the Divine Land, so for them it was not required to comprehend the laws created by a holy being. Holy beings had a perfect understanding of the various kinds of laws, however different holy beings had different comprehension of the same law, so their arrangement of the laws was also slightly different. Martial artists from the Divine Land could comprehend law power in the Divine Land itself and had no need of going to the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land to comprehend it. Therefore, there was only one reason why they crossed the cold flame field, and that was to enter the interior world. Truth be told, the joint action of the three great races had fulfilled Laquisha's wish, because the soul-suppressing cliff that she had always wanted to go to was in the interior world. It was not easy for even Han clan to enter the interior world. In the past, her brother Pascal had organized for the Han clan, the Qin clan, and other Divine Land forces in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land to come together to break into the interior world. They had paid a hefty price for it, with more than 20 world lords dead. Pascal too had been heavily injured. No one had ever made it to the soul-suppressing cliff, even with such a large-scale mobilization of forces. As for places like Sunflower Waterland and Equinox Sand, it was less likely for them to think of a way to set foot there. Pascal had no choice then but to retreat in disappointment. He had been dejected for a long time because of this failure. Back then when Pascal was sent to the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, the Han clan had hoped that he could open the soul-suppressing cliff. Unfortunately, even though Pascal had made many achievements in his cultivation, he could not come up with a way to enter the soul-suppressing cliff before he left the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. This time, it was Laquisha's turn to give it a try, and she really hoped that she would succeed in the mission that even her big brother couldn't complete. In the eyes of the others, Laquisha's talent was far inferior to Pascal's. The only thing that made Laquisha stand out was her preternatural flame, which she herself could not completely control. So when Laquisha expressed her wish to enter the soul-suppressing cliff, it was taken to be no more than a jest. Even Kenan and several others who had perfunctorily expressed their support for her did not believe she had the ability to do so. After some preparations, the Skyland race warriors were the first to cross the visible snow boundary. Soon after, everyone else followed. The moment they entered the cold flame field, blue flames took shape on everyone's hair, clothes, even their eyebrows and eyelashes. Although these cold flames were condensed by ice or snow, they were not solid. They swayed like ice blue flames. The flames were cold and did not make them feel the slightest of warmth. Instead, the chill was piercing cold and carried with it a burning sensation. Zen did not devour the gold sun fruit. Crossing the boundary, he felt as if his entire body had frozen up. When he saw the cold flames all over his body, he was slightly surprised. They were indeed powerful. As he shook his body, the cold flames were doused out. But not long after, they came back again. The poison contained in the cold flames could penetrate anything and anyone. As it penetrated into Zen's body, it flew through his meridians and spread into his inner world. Chapter 1533, Advancing. After entering Zen's inner world, the cold flame poison started to fall gently like snowflakes. As these snowflakes fell onto the brown chaotic sea, they released chilly air, and it looked like the chaotic sea was going to freeze over. But nothing of the sort happened. Instead, the chilly air was instantly devoured by the chaotic energy. Ever since Zen had endowed chaotic energy with the ability to devour other things, it could transform almost anything. He clearly knew that the chaotic energy was a formidable force. Currently, Zen was primarily focused on refining his body. He could make use of the chaotic energy to display the god's intimidating strike, but he usually unleashed the power of this strike by comprehending the godly way. He did not exert the chaotic energy to its extreme. That was to say that Zen was lacking a cultivation method, which could help him fully utilize the power of the chaotic energy. The cold flame poison was still falling down in soft waves in his inner world. The majority of the poison had disappeared into the chaotic sea, while a small portion had already fallen onto the main continent of his inner world. A few unlucky creatures might have come in contact with the poison and got instantly frozen into ice cubes. But the overall impact on his inner world was negligible. Zen could deal with the cold flame poison effortlessly, but it wasn't so easy for the other warriors. Although the Skyland race had distributed the gold sun fruits, most of the martial artists present chose not to devour the fruit. According to the leader of the Skyland race, they were capable of comprehending the profound mystery of the ice law in the cold flame field. The truth was that the martial artists from the Divine Land were even more clear than Caden that the so-called profound mystery of the ice law was the famed skill of the master of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. The ice soul flame was renowned in the Divine Land 30,000 years ago. This flame was a unique profound mystery created by the master of the divine refinement Forbidden Land. And he was the first to unravel this mystery. When the master of the divine refinement Forbidden Land became a holy being, he constructed a divine refinement Forbidden Land. He then made an announcement that everyone could cultivate in that land. Warriors could also absorb his strength source. This was a very exciting development for everyone in the divine land. In addition to this, his knowledge of the ice soul flame was sealed within the cold flame field of the divine refinement Forbidden Land, thereby effectively shielding it from the outside world. In so many years, several warriors had entered this cold flame field, but none of them were able to comprehend the mystery of the ice soul flame. For many martial artists from other races as well as those from the divine land, this was indeed a golden opportunity to finally comprehend the profound mystery. The gold sun fruit could resist the cold flame poison, but they would only use it when they could not hold on any longer. Most warriors, including Zen, were facing the same predicament. The cold flame poison lingered around their bodies and followed the meridians in their bodies to invade their inner worlds. Soon it began to snow within their inner worlds. However, their inner worlds could not be compared with Zen's. The cold flame poison might be overbearing, but in the end it was only formed from life vitality, and the chaotic energy overpowered it. The temperature in the inner worlds of these martial artists began to plummet slowly. The inner worlds of the spirit transformation realm warriors, especially those at the top level of the spirit transformation realm, were already perfect. Some martial artists' inner worlds already had 4th grade and 5th grade sects, which were guarded by the internal elixir realm martial artists and even virtual tribulation realm martial artists. As the temperature plummeted, the creatures were in great danger. The snow formed by the cold flame poison resulted in an extremely low temperature, causing the warriors' inner worlds to be trapped in a frozen land. Layers of solid ice formed on the life vitality sea of some martial artists, bringing about devastating damage to the living beings within the inner worlds. The secondary creatures, which survived in the warriors' inner worlds, were unable to control their own destinies. It was possible that when they came into this world as infants, they would freeze to death in the harsh winter, or when they just became nature creatures, they might get infected by cold flames and freeze to death in an instant. This was not only happening among the secondary creatures but also in the universes created by the holy beings. If the holy beings were to fight, even the solid universes would be affected and suffer an earth-shattering extinction. In the evolutionary universe, the duration of a grand era was 3.6 billion years, and the end of each grand era was accompanied by a calamity that brought about extinction of the species. This kind of extinction was not caused by the battle between Mike and the others, but by something else. The Supreme Lords in the universe had come up with a rule, which was contrary to the reality of the situation, and they had even tried to enforce this rule to avoid the extinction of the universe. This was the plight of the secondary creatures. They could not completely grasp their fates and even their vision was limited. Even the Supreme Lords would not be able to control their own future, as they were also secondary creatures. The living beings in the inner world who were destroyed by the cold flame poison, probably thought that this calamity was brought about by the wrath of the gods. Thus they all knelt down to pray, hoping to appease the angry gods. They did not know that this catastrophe had occurred only because the inner world's owner wanted to undergo training. Huff, huff, huff. The glacial wind of the cold flame field blew fiercely. When this happened, everyone's bodies immediately shone with light. This was because the cold flames enveloping their bodies were blue and bright. They looked as if they were covered in sparkling jewelry, which gave them a beautiful appearance. At the same time, the amount of cold flame poison in their bodies greatly increased. This process was quite painful. The cold moved from the outside to the warrior's inner world, and after ravaging the inner world, it moved back outside. It was bone-chilling cold. Due to this process, the cold flame poison in the inner world had left the mark of rule there. In these past few years, no one had comprehended the profound mystery of the ice soul flame completely, but this cold flame poison had indeed brought many benefits to the warriors, the least of which was a rapid improvement in the speed at which the ice law in everyone's inner world was perfected. After one cultivated to the higher level, they needed to use the laws they had comprehended to construct new laws within their inner worlds. Of course, this did not mean that people could endlessly keep absorbing the cold flame poison, as it could ultimately be fatal. Some of the weaker martial artists looked pale. When an icy wind blew, they couldn't help but curl up. If you can't withstand the pressure, don't be stubborn about holding on. You will be able to resist it after eating the gold sun fruit. Someone from the Skyland race reminded everyone. The warriors couldn't stand it any longer and finally gorged the gold sun fruit. After entering the warriors' bodies, the gold sun fruit quickly made its way into every inner world and turned into a golden sun, releasing a thermal current that warmed everything. Those who were battling life and death were naturally saved at the last moment. The inner world survived the crisis and became a vibrant place again. This warm current spread from the inside to the outside, melting away the cold from their meridians. Thanks to this life-infusing warm current, a healthy rosy color returned on the warriors' faces. But there were still many martial artists who were trying their level best to resist the discomfort and hold on. Among them, Elena was the most relaxed, as she could deal with the cold flame poison effortlessly. She was wearing a fire gown, so the cold flame poison could not enter her body. She was curious about the reaction of the crowd, and couldn't help but laugh when she saw the cold flames that flickered on the faces, hair and beards of Zen and the others. Everyone continued to fly at a low altitude and they were not slow either. After traveling for 4 hours, they had crossed a distance of over 100,000 miles. The difference in the level of strength of the warriors could be ascertained during the journey of 100,000 miles. When they traveled 10,000 miles, only a few of the weaker martial artists had consumed the gold sun fruit. When they reached 30,000 miles, 20% of the group had swallowed the gold sun fruit. When they reached 70,000 miles, more than 90% of the martial artists had consumed the gold sun fruit. Of all the martial artists present, only the Collapsing Mountain Race's Divinity Hunt Squad members, the 7 elders of the Skyland race, and a few elites of the Harmony race were able to reach 100,000 miles. Of course, Zen and Elena were among this group of achievers who made it as well. As for Laquisha, if she were to use her abnormal flame, she would be able to resist the cold flame poison. However, those who specialized in using fire were even more afraid of the cold. So she had gobbled up the gold sun fruit when she reached 30,000 miles. Chapman is right, not only is Zen capable of resisting the abnormal flame, he also seems to be able to withstand the extreme cold, Tilton, the leader of the Harmony race, remarked as he gazed at Zen with a mix of admiration and surprise. He had come here with the members of the Harmony race, so he had naturally learned from Caden and Chapman that Zen was a flame-proof warrior with special theurgy. He also had never thought that the flame-proof warrior that the Collapsing Mountain warriors had mentioned a few months ago would increase his strength to this extent in such a short period of time. Initially, he had his doubts when he heard Caden and Chapman talk about Zen's impressive ability before, but now he was convinced that Zen was indeed extremely powerful. At this moment, he saw that Zen could also move freely in this world of ice and snow without needing to devour the gold sun fruit. He indeed had remarkable abilities. Ha ha, you and I are able to withstand the cold flame poison when we reach 100,000 miles. Do you think that brat can withstand the cold flame poison after he travels 150,000 miles? Caden asked suddenly. 150,000 miles. That was easily the deepest region of the cold flame field. Even the 3 leaders needed to devour the gold sun fruit at that point. Chapter 1534. Advance towards the end. They had traveled about 100,000 miles when the cold flames below their feet began to blaze and the azure light reflected off them continuously, making it hard to look straight at them. It was as if everyone was standing on a sea of fire, but the azure flames weren't making them feel warm. Suddenly, a member of the Divinity Hunt Squad of the Collapsing Mountain race fell towards the cold flames below. Caden was quick to react. He spread his wings, turned into a streak of light, and took off into the air, circling below the Collapsing Mountain member and saving him from falling. No one can save you if you fall into the cold flames. So if you can't hold on any longer, don't be a hero, reminded Caden. The upper echelons of the 3 races were also prepared to compete with each other. None of the members of the Collapsing Mountain race's Divinity Hunt Squad had eaten any gold sun fruit. As pure body refiners, it was impossible for them to understand the meaning of the ice law. Extreme cold was a means of body refining, but there was no need to take such a huge risk. Avery, eat it, ordered Chapman. The warrior called Avery nodded and swallowed the gold sun fruit in one gulp. In addition to him, another member of the Skyland race had also given up, forcing himself. He too swallowed the gold sun fruit, and Caden continued to lead the way while the rest followed behind. As the cold flame poison that had wafted into Zen's inner world increased and condensed, the snow in that world grew heavier and heavier. The creatures in the inner world were currently experiencing an unprecedented winter. Although the chaotic sea was not frozen, its temperature had dropped considerably. If the temperature continued to drop, the creatures in his inner world would most likely face death on a massive scale. Losing some of those creatures wouldn't have much of an impact on Zen. After all, he wasn't reliant on the faith energy of those people right now. But he still didn't want the people he had created to die. As Zen pondered this, his thoughts rippled and moved. Countless schools of fish suddenly appeared from within the chaotic sea. They leapt out of the water, spread their wings, and flew into the sky. The fishermen in the inner world witnessed this scene, and there were people who recorded it. They would pass it down for years to come. Legend would have it that the fish had turned into big birds to save people from the heavy snow. They didn't know that this was just an idea of Zen's. Once the fish took off into the air, they charged towards the pieces of cold flame poison, turned into chaotic energy the minute they got into contact, and devoured the pieces of the poison. Zen tried his best to keep the cold flame poison in midair. At the same time, the 9 stars in the sky began to move unceasingly. 9 shining stars. Zen did not draw out the energy within the stars. Instead, he allowed the 9 stars to move about with their own strength. Drilling wood was a method to make fire, in which matter could produce heat while moving at high speeds. Only then could flames emerge from the wooden board. Heat is generated during the movement. The hotter a star was, the more intense its internal activities would be. Even Zen was horrified at the powerful energy created by the 9 stars. If these forces were to be mobilized, the heat emitted would be beyond imagination. As a result, the temperature that had dropped slowly began to rise under the illumination of the 9 stars. Even after he had settled his inner world down, Zen was still unhurried and followed the rest of the group. By the time they had traveled 120,000 miles, there were only 2 people in the Divinity Hunt squad who hadn't eaten the gold sun fruit. Skyland race had done better. As cultivators, their comprehension and adaptability towards the laws were usually much better than the collapsing mountain races. But the collapsing mountain members relied on their physical bodies to resist this. So there wasn't any simple standard to measure which race was stronger. By now, the Harmony race had only one warrior left, their leader, Tilton. People from the Harmony race were peaceful. Some of them could have made it this far, but they did not like to fight and knew that there was no need for them to show off. So many of them had retreated and swallowed the gold sun fruit. Even the 3 leaders, Chapman, Tilton, and Caden, looked more and more exhausted as they resisted the erosion of the raging cold flame. They had become more and more focused in their quest to resist the cold flame poison. At the beginning, they had paid attention to Zen's body. But then they could only focus on moving forward, using all the energy in their bodies to protect themselves. All other warriors were paying attention to Zen. When Holy J had stepped into the Holy Realm, he was conferred the title of one of the 3 newly promoted holy beings, but he never accepted a disciple. Convention dictates that once a holy being gains a new understanding of the profound meaning of the laws in the divine land, they would turn their own comprehension of the laws into monolith inscriptions and spread it throughout the world. After all, at their level, they have mastered all the laws. And the space in which new profound mysteries of the laws are being explored in the divine land is growing smaller and smaller. But Holy J had broken the rules and refused to pass down the inscriptions. Instead, he sealed the profound meaning of the ice soul flame, attracting countless talents to enter this place to comprehend it. None of them had succeeded. It is said that a holy being once questioned Holy J about it. But Holy J had just nodded with a smile and hadn't said anything. A martial artist wearing a purple hat was leisurely talking on a flying shuttle. What he said wasn't unfamiliar to the martial artists in the divine land. They had heard about it several times already. But some of the secondary creatures that came from the universe were listening with rapt attention. The difference between a secondary creature and a divine land martial artist wasn't just a matter of resources and birth, but also of information. This meant that, including Zen, all the secondary creatures were very careful and would do their best to gather information about the divine land. The purple-hatted warrior was happy to show off when he saw the other warriors focusing their attention. Actually, according to my speculations, if you want to comprehend the ice soul flame, you need to rely on your own strength, instead of using the gold sun fruit to cross the cold flame field. It's a pity that no one has succeeded so far. Even Pascal only lasted 130,000 miles. But he had also been defeated in the end. He was so close. At these words, Laquisha and Elena looked at each other. Kenan responded from the sideline, someone had raised this idea a long time ago. Now you're claiming that it is your own. So shameless. My young master was indeed defeated and had been close, but how far did you travel? The purple-hatted warrior was embarrassed at Kenan's words. After all, it was an achievement for Pascal to have reached 130,000 miles. The important thing was that he hadn't even been a world lord yet at the time. He had only been at the spirit transformation realm. And once he had become a world lord, he had no longer been willing to come. The profound meaning of the ice soul flame was strong, But Pascal, who had cultivated both body and life vitality, was a young prince after all. He hadn't taken it too seriously. Although Zen had paid part of his attention to resisting the cold flame poison, his eyes and ears had also been focused on the martial artist in the purple hat. To walk to the end of the cold flame field, he had already walked over 120,000 miles, and had only 20,000 miles to go. What would happen to him if he reached the end by himself? Would he be able to comprehend the ice soul flame? Zen had no idea how powerful this martial art was. But he did know that since it was a skill inherited from a holy being, it wasn't a weak one. Zen's interest was piqued at this thought. He had been considering whether it was necessary to continue on like this. If it was just a pure test without any rewards, then there was no need to force it. He was not a masochist. Now it seemed that it was necessary to give it a try. It was not long before everyone finally broke through the 130,000 miles. The second they had reached that mark, something unexpected happened. Tilton of the Harmony race gave up and swallowed a gold sun fruit. Chapman was the only one of the collapsing mountain race that persisted. There were only 2 people left from the Skyland race, Caden and an elder named Frayne. And at this moment, Frayne fell downward without a word. Zen had been focused on resisting the cold flame poison. He didn't have the time to be distracted. And by the time he discovered the problem, the elder had already fallen. Frayne, Elder Frayne! Some warriors screamed and rushed towards the elder, but they couldn't get there in time. The crowd watched as Elder Frayne was struck by the cold flames below and turned into a lump of ice, falling hard towards the ground. Frayne tried to save himself. As he fell, his entire body was still emitting raging flames. He wanted to resist the ice flames, but the bright yellow flames were only formed from life vitality. So how could they fight the power of the ice flames? The raging flames then disappeared from everyone's sight, and then, cracking sounds could be heard, like glass hitting the ground. It was the sound of Frayne's body shattering. A deep fear took root within everyone, reflecting in their eyes. Many of them subconsciously raised themselves up. Although they all knew how terrifying this cold flame was, witnessing the death of that elder with their own eyes truly brought the horror home. Chapter 1535, A Mirror. Deaths were quite common in the cold flame field. However, the death of an elder of the Skyland race was an extremely rare occurrence. After all, the Skyland race mainly cultivated life vitality, and they were also on their way to find out whether the Divine Land martial artist's speculations were true or not. The Skyland race attempted to travel across the cold flame field every once in a while, in hopes of witnessing a miracle that would let them understand its hidden mysteries. However, the Skyland race were unaware that the master of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, commonly referred to as Holy J by the martial artists of the Divine Land, had already established a boundary that was impossible to cross when he created the 6 great races. No matter it was Chapman, Caden, or Tilton from the Harmony race, while they were truly outstanding and their strengths improved really quickly, they couldn't advance any further after they had reached a certain limit. It wasn't because they lacked talent or perseverance, but rather, the boundary had already been set ever since the 6 great races had been created. Therefore, the Skyland elites and elders had never gotten to cross the cold flame field with just their own strengths, no matter how hard they had tried. It seemed that they were destined to be always close, but never reaching success. After the elder of the Skyland race had died, Caden and Chapman also gave up. Both of them swallowed a gold sun fruit and they immediately felt better. Everyone focused on Zen once again. Basically, among the hundreds of people present, he was the only one who had not eaten a gold sun fruit. At this moment, even Zen had become extremely careful. The cold flame poison filled all the fibers in Zen's being, and at the same time, the power of the 9 stars that flowed in his body became stronger and faster. However, simply relying on the radiance that the 9 stars emitted didn't completely melt those snowflakes. Although his inner world's temperature had been stabilized at a certain point, it still continued to drop slowly. The cold flame poison's power increased every time Zen flew 1,000 miles away. By the time he had covered 130,000 miles, its power had increased by several degrees already. In such case, the threat it posed to Zen became deadlier. Then again, the 9 stars' power did not last forever. It would take a long time to completely replenish the strength source within them. Furthermore, crossing the cold flame field was only the first step. Meanwhile, the other warriors did not increase their speed as they traversed the ice field because of the fatal threat from the cold flame poison. Even though the gold sun fruit possessed the power of the sun flame, there was still the possibility of it being extinguished if it was faced with copious amounts of cold flame poison. Thus, everyone still maintained a relatively constant speed that was neither too fast, nor too slow. On the other hand, Zen was different. Since he tried to challenge the cold flame field and had so far withstood the cold flame poison's corrosion, he didn't need to maintain the same speed like everyone else. With that thought in mind, he suddenly moved in a flash, broke through the air, and advanced several thousand feet forward. The moment he came out of the space, he maxed out his speed limit and suddenly transformed into a straight line in front of everyone's eyes, before he rapidly advanced once again. Whoosh! Ah, is that kid crazy? He has just broken Pascal's record and he's already desperately moving forward. If he really can endure the cold flame poison, then doing so will help him to relieve the pressure. After all, the shorter the time consumed, the less of his life vitality would be used. Caden, Chapman, and Tilton also looked at each other in shock. This flame-proof warrior is truly extraordinary, Tilton couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Maybe he really will be able to safely pass through, Chapman said as he stared at the straight line that had faded away into distance. However, Caden looked worried. What if this kid can't hold on any longer, and dies here? He said. The only reason they had gathered so many warriors this time for this mission was because Zen was there with them. If Zen died, then there was no need for them to continue anymore. Let's follow up and take a look, said Chapman. Zen's life was still the most important no matter what. It did not matter if he could or couldn't comprehend the cold flame field's profound mysteries. Once the three of them had finally decided, they chased after Zen at full speed. But as they continued their pursuit, they realized that they were getting further away from Zen. After they tried to chase him for about 10,000 miles, their faces lit up with a wry smile. Zen was actually nowhere to be found. Fortunately, the cold flame field was a vast plain. Except for the cold flame that existed everywhere, there were no other dangers. Meanwhile, Zen felt as if he was sliced by an axe as the cold wind beat down on his body. At that moment, Zen's entire figure had disappeared as countless blue cold flames wrapped around him. He looked like a giant ball of fire that flew in the sky. While the cold blue flames further enveloped his body, he concentrated on rushing forward as he also paid more attention to his inner world. An unprecedented storm whirled around at his inner world's central continent. The storm contained 6 layers of wind law, which was the level of wind law that Zen had comprehended. When combined with the chaotic energy, it released an immensely incredible amount of power. The storm now covered the whole central continent and the world tree. Zen had started the storm because he wanted to protect the entire central continent within it. Since the snow that was transformed from the cold flame poison in his inner world became heavier, it might soon cover the entire central continent, which would end up in the deaths of the living beings in the inner world. A strong wind howled and blew the snowflakes to the chaotic sea that surrounded the central continent. The chaotic sea's surging waves faintly showed signs of being frozen as well. Floating ice appeared above the brown seawater, and these blocks of ice seemed to drift towards each other. If it was a martial artist that cultivated life vitality, then everything in his inner world would have been frozen in an instant. A holy being could unseal such a kind of chaos, and not to mention, Zen had made the chaotic energy possess the ability of devouring power. After the 9 stars had swiftly devoured the snowflakes, they began to emit a bright beam of light that illuminated the entire chaotic sea. The many living beings in the inner world had already felt the impending apocalypse. Millions of martial artists scrambled on their feet to pray. May the Venerable Creator use his holy power to expel this deadly snow. May our race live on forever. May the Grand Theurgy of the Creator help our race go through this crisis. Zen had felt every single word that reverberated within his inner world. It was his instinct as this world's creator, but he had no time to pay them any attention at the moment. Charge, whoosh, 140,000 miles. It wasn't long before Zen had crossed the boundary of 140,000 miles. The blue flames on the ice field had already been extinguished, but they weren't gone in the real sense. A substance changed its form when it had reached its limit, just like how water turned into ice after its temperature reached a certain degree. Naturally, those cold flames had changed their forms as well. They turned into regular icicles that were stuck on the ground like sharp needles. It was no doubt that the whole place was a world of extremely low temperatures. There were no signs of life at all. Even the flow of energy and the transformation of laws had stopped. There were no gales, not even a sound of the wind. The surroundings were completely silent, and only Zen quietly advanced in the air. At that moment, the flame poison did not only freeze Zen's inner world, but also the flow of his blood, the beating of his heart, and his mind. Charge. The immensely freezing environment almost stopped Zen's thinking, and he only had just one thought in mind, to fly forward at top speed. Just then, the vast and cold flame field suddenly underwent a peculiar change. The densely packed icicles were originally an icy blue color, but some of them suddenly turned orange and formed orange runes. The juxtaposition of the two colors formed a sharp contrast. However, as Zen flew above the runes, the orange hue of the icicles started to fade away and turn back to icy blue. Zen traveled further and the runes on the ground began to fade as well. It was as if the orange icicles had formed a welcome carpet for Zen. Once he had passed through, the path began to dissipate on its own. Even if Zen's mind was already frozen to its limit, he still noticed the strange phenomenon below him. He saw an orange strip of runes that extended into the distance in front of him. 150,000 miles. Soon enough, Zen finally arrived at the end of the cold flame field. The runes that had suddenly appeared along the way had completely disappeared as well. In front of him was now a mirror that was over 10 million feet tall, and extended all the way to the top of the cave in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. It divided the huge cave into two parts, and the scenes that were reflected in the mirror made him feel that this world was boundless. Chapter 1536. The Ice Field. This mirror was like a huge lake made of mercury, and it lay horizontally in front of Zen, blocking his path. He approached the huge mirror slowly and cautiously, not knowing what to expect. He saw an identical image of himself in the mirror, slowly approaching him too. Zen extended his hand with some uncertainty and gently pressed the mirror. A ripple immediately appeared where his fingertip touched it and spread out in all directions. This is really a mercury lake. He remained standing where he was, not wanting to act rashly. If his guess was correct, this would be the entrance to the interior world that Caden had mentioned. He had no knowledge about the so-called exterior or interior world, so he decided to wait for the aboriginals to arrive before doing anything further. When Zen approached the mirror, the cold flame poison disappeared completely and the temperature within his inner world began to rise rapidly. Under his control, the storm within his body calmed down, and the 9 stars in his body gradually stopped circulating. If Zen continued to drive the 9 stars to circulate, they would release a strong amount of heat, which might burn all the living beings in his inner world. Just when Zen was trying to restore his inner world to normalcy, he suddenly discovered that there seemed to be something on the chaotic sea. Runes. He froze. When he rushed along the way, he had seen a path formed by runes before him. As he continued onward, the path disappeared behind him. Looking back, the runes had already completely disappeared. At that time, Zen's mind was frozen by the cold temperature and he was in no mood to examine them carefully. Who would have thought that these runes, which stretched thousands of miles, were already imprinted on the chaotic sea? Are these runes the profound mysteries of Holy J? Zen focused his gaze on the densely packed runes. This layer of runes stretched out thousands of miles and the strip circled on the chaotic sea, undulating on the surface of the water. The characters of the runes were somewhat similar to the Sanskrit words that Zen had seen before. There were many types of Sanskrit. Some Buddhist classics were also recorded in Sanskrit. But Zen had only seen 3 types of Sanskrit that were similar to the runes on the chaotic sea. The first type was the Sanskrit that appeared on Zen's body, which was also the language in which the grand weapon refining method was recorded. He was familiar with this type of Sanskrit, having seen it many times before. Each time his body was tempered by the preternatural flame, the golden Sanskrit characters would appear on his body. As for the second type of Sanskrit, he had seen it when Xenia had employed her full strength. However, both these types of Sanskrit were very similar, almost identical, but the arrangement and content of each word were different. The main thing was that Zen had never come into contact with this kind of culture, so he naturally couldn't read it. The runes that were before Zen now had a similar shape to the first 2 types of Sanskrit. However, their style was completely different from that of the other types, as if they were lacking a special quality. Yes, these 3 types of Sanskrit must originate from the same culture. Earlier, I didn't have the time to examine them closely, but now, it seems that these runes might be a type of Sanskrit. And the difference is that these 3 types of Sanskrit were written by different people, Zen ruminated. Each person had their own style of writing. The same sentence, when written by different people, would look different because of the handwriting. Some people had a lively style of penmanship and each of the stroke looked like a dragon or a phoenix was dancing on the paper, while some others had very exquisite writing styles like that of famous calligraphers. It was very probable that these runes were written by the master of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, Holy J. Judging by this, Zen assumed that Holy J had also obtained some Sanskrit words, which recorded the ice soul flame. The information that was available to Zen was too little for him to deduce any further. If that was really the case, then the ice soul flame was probably not just a type of profound mystery of the ice law. While he was lost in thought, the band of light formed by the Sanskrit words suddenly began to move on the chaotic sea. It was like a living creature, floating towards the central continent in Zen's inner world. As he saw these Sanskrit words begin to move, Zen instantly became vigilant, waiting to jump into action at the slightest provocation. However, his inner world was not as fragile as that of the other martial artists. Chaotic energy itself was an extremely powerful existence. Strictly speaking, it was the highest level of original substance. If these Sanskrit words made any strange movements, Zen would instantly use the chaotic energy to devour them. Zen's worst fears came true, and he wasn't even able to control it. As the thousands of miles-long Sanskrit words flowed, they circled a part of the sea at the other end of the central continent, and then the temperature began to drop. The moment the band of Sanskrit words released the cold air, Zen immediately activated the special property of the chaotic energy in order to devour them. However, he quickly discovered that it was useless. These Sanskrit words couldn't be devoured. In fact, even the chaotic sea that was being circled by the Sanskrit words was out of Zen's control. It was as if at this moment, he had lost the control of a portion of chaotic energy within his body. He had actually lost control of his own inner world. This was something that had never happened to him before. It was a scary situation to be in. In the blink of an eye, the chaotic energy in the sea, controlled by the Sanskrit words, was frozen and, at the same time, it started to turn into an extremely solid layer of ice. At first, the layer of ice was brown. After all, it was formed by the chaotic sea, but not long after, it turned into a bluish-white color, exactly the same as the cold flame field. Boom, boom, boom. This ice field was not small by any standards. It was almost 1/3 of the size of the central continent. A huge ice field suddenly appeared at the side. As it expanded, the entire central continent began to shake. The living beings on the central continent naturally panicked in the face of such an intense earthquake. Fortunately, the tremors disappeared quickly. When the ice field was completely formed, the earthquake ceased. At the same time, an icicle appeared abruptly in the center of the ice field and began to grow uncontrollably. As it continued growing, countless branches started forming on top of the icicle. In the blink of an eye, the icicle turned into an enormous ice tree standing upright on the ice field. A new continent is formed, Zen mumbled. This ice field formed a pressure in his inner world, pushing the chaotic sea outwards. Zen felt a faint swelling sensation in his cinnabar field. This was caused by the expansion of his inner world. It was a sign that his cultivation level had increased. The ice tree continued to flourish inside. It was originally only about 1,000 feet tall, but several minutes later, it had already grown to tens of thousands of feet tall. It was now almost the same height as the world tree on the other side of the central continent. A magnificent cold flame flower bloomed atop the phenomenal ice tree. If one were to look down at this scene from the sky at this moment, one would see that on the west side of the central continent was a cyan world tree that reached into the clouds, and on the other side was a crystal-clear ice tree. They stood opposite each other, yet formed a harmonious scene. The meaning of this development was unclear to Zen. Back then, the creating axe slashed and created space for the divine land to come into existence, and later the Lord of Weapons opened the heavens. Sunrise tree, lofty tree, ray tree, hidden tree, these were the 4 divine trees. Perhaps these 4 great trees were not extraordinary themselves. It was just that these 4 divine trees had all been planted during the first divine era. Their roots directly penetrated through the divine land and extended into the chaos, thus giving them the ability to absorb the chaos for their own uses. Having absorbed the chaos for countless years, they finally had the qualifications to become divine trees. The 4 divine trees had stabilized the divine land, however they shared a symbiotic relationship with the land as they also relied on it to stabilize their own positions in order to become the unshakable 4 pillars of the divine land. Zen had used a world tree seed to create his first giant tree. Now, another ice tree had appeared on the ice field. These 2 trees would also absorb the chaotic energy to grow, and they would also grow into divine trees in the future. As for the cold flame flower that had blossomed on top of the ice tree, Zen retracted his consciousness from his inner world, and then slightly spread out the 5 fingers in one of his hands. Sizzle! A cold flame was set ablaze in Zen's hand. It is just as I thought. A hint of a smile appeared on Zen's face as he expertly poured chaotic energy into the cold flame. Sizzle! In the blink of an eye, the size of this cold flame expanded by more than 10 times and instantly enveloped Zen. The frosty air emitted from this cold flame was so strong that even the mercury that formed the mirror beside him froze. Chapter 1537, Interior World. The power of the ice soul flame was intense and terrifying. It originated from the ice law in the divine land and thus was considered a complete law power. The laws in the universes, however, heavily relied on the comprehension of the holy beings, which were often partial and incomplete. Zen balled his hand into a fist and lightly squeezed, causing the ice flame to dissipate in seconds. A small smile crept onto his face. It would seem that the holy beings' profound mysteries were reliable even during crucial moments. But a lingering question stayed in his mind. Just how strong was the ice flame? There was no way to test it, so he had no choice but to wait in front of the mirror. Minutes passed as he waited. Zen was in deep thought before he took out the gold sun fruit and swallowed it in one gulp. He was not certain about what the ice soul flame meant or if it was just one of the many deep mysteries of the ice law. But after careful considerations, Zen opted to keep the information to himself. If he did not swallow the gold sun fruit, those people would definitely ask about it. He was not in the mood to make up another lie to satisfy their curiosity, so he might as well just swallow the fruit and get it over with. Not long after, Caden, Chapman, and Tilton finally passed through the cold flame field. After seeing Zen standing in front of the mirror and sizing him up a bit, Caden frowned and asked, "Zen, did you swallow the gold sun fruit?" Zen turned to him and nodded his head slightly. At his confirmation, disappointment flickered on their faces. There was no doubt that Zen was the last person to pass through the cold flame field without the help of the gold sun fruit. Before, when Zen was running madly like a lunatic, the three of them failed to find any traces of him and thought he had died in the cold flame field. They did not expect Zen to reach the end. Much to their disappointment, he had used the gold sun fruit in the end. "When did you eat it?" Caden asked with a growing frown. Zen let out a faint smile, saying, "When there were still 5,000 miles to go. I couldn't bear it any longer. I think this was a failure." Caden drew a deep sigh. He was immensely disappointed, but he was not sure if it was because he didn't get to see the secret unraveled or if it was because Zen didn't persevere on his own to the end. Unlike Caden, Tilton was much calmer and accepting. He said, "That's understandable. It's not easy to endure for 145,000 miles after all. At the very least, no one's ever traveled this far before. We've already managed a great feat." Aside from the martial artists at the Spirit Supreme Realm and Spirit Transformation Realm, there were also many world lords in the Divine Land who attempted to travel through the cold flame field. However, because of their limited cultivation, some people jumped to the conclusion that no one could pass through the cold flame field with just their own strength unless they were a true god. Usually and in normal circumstances, true gods were not allowed to enter the universes. There were no supreme lords or true gods in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. No one could ever travel across the ice flame field with just their own strength alone. It was simply impossible. Chapman laughed, his voice filling the air. "If we enter the interior world now, Zen will be able to raise his cultivation to the Spirit Transformation Realm, and then he can go back and travel across the cold flame field again. There's still hope that he will make it." "Yes," Caden agreed with a nod, a flash of glint passing through his eyes. It had to be said that when the 6 great races had been created, they were bestowed with formidable talents by the master of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. They had a nearly perfect body and a unique cultivation land. However, their master did not give them everything as he had deprived them of the right to explore. In a complete universe, countless creatures and races competed fiercely against each other to survive and obtain more and deeper knowledge. The 6 great races had no troubles surviving. As the natives of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, their status was naturally higher than the others. Even the martial artists from the Divine Land were inferior and couldn't hold a candle to their might. But despite their strength, the races never stopped pining for more knowledge. Had they been created only to serve the martial artists from the other races? After all, each race was being monitored by a prophet. But if this was the case, then what was the purpose of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land? To the wild beasts, these questions were useless and meaningless. However, to the intelligent life forms, the mystery and lack of answers were enough to drive them insane. Whether or not Zen obtained the inheritance of this profound mystery of the ice law wasn't important. To them, resolving the doubts in their hearts was more important. It would naturally explain why Caden and the rest were much more enthusiastic than Zen himself. After they had waited for a while, the rest of the team finally caught up. Even though they had eaten the gold sun fruit, which had turned into a sun in their elixir field and continuously released heat, crossing the last 10,000 miles would prove to be extremely challenging and difficult for them. In fact, during the last journey, 3 people succumbed to the ice and froze for eternity due to their weak strength. 2 of them were from the other races while the last one was from the Skyland race. The stronger warriors looked slightly better, but the weaker warriors were turning pale and cyan from the extreme cold. The ice law in that quiet world could freeze the sun itself. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call that a narrow escape. Despite this, venturing into the interior world now was everyone's decision. Whether it was the warriors of the other races or the people from the three major races, they all took careful steps and made their own mental preparations for this arduous journey. To the martial artists of the other races, the interior world was a trove of great lucky chances. If they followed these natives, there was a chance they could obtain unimaginable benefits. For the three major races, however, it was different. This was a desperate attempt. After everyone had arrived, Caden looked at the crowd and said in a booming voice, "This mirror lake is the entrance and exit of the interior world. Interior and exterior worlds are two completely different worlds, and inside the interior world, the danger level will increase by several folds. We three major races will do our best. But everybody, please be careful and follow our instructions. It is your own fault if you disobey us and end up losing your life in return." The people listened to him and nodded in silence, absorbing his words. After that, Caden unfurled his wings behind his back, raised his head, and walked toward the lake in careful, deliberate steps. In a split second, the layer of mercury covered his entire body until he was completely engulfed. Chapman, Tilton, and the rest soon followed and entered the mirror lake one after another. Finally, it was his turn. Without any hesitations, Zen turned around and dove straight into the lake. At first, the layer of silver material in the lake looked similar to mercury, but after he entered and inspected it closely, Zen realized it wasn't mercury but a type of space law instead. He didn't know what level this holy J had reached during his training of the space law, but the power of the space law didn't dissipate and instead solidified into this silver liquid substance. The layer of this material was only 10 feet wide. After taking a few steps, Zen emerged from the mercury. As soon as he got out, he swept his gaze around and found himself in an even more bizarre world. The interior world of the mirror lake was yet another huge cave. To his surprise, however, the scenery of the cave was distorting and never the same. The faint yellow light pouring down from the ceiling drowned everything in the world with a layer of dusk. The mountains in the distance were quickly flashing and distorting, as if they were mere illusions, and it gave Zen an extremely surreal feeling as if he were trapped in a dream. After everyone had entered, Caden hushed everyone into silence and then pointed a finger toward a row of black hills not far away. Because the environment kept on flashing in and out of existence, everyone's visions began to distort as well. They thought something was wrong with their eyes, so instead of focusing on the black hills, they rubbed their eyes and ran their gazes somewhere else. However, Caden and his group had come to the interior world many times before. They were used to this. When he pointed a finger at the row of black hills, all of the other martial artists paled at what they saw. To their shock, those black hills were actually formless sky pythons that were currently in deep slumber. The world lords, the martial artists from the other races who were currently at Spirit Supreme Realm, or Spirit Transformation Realm, and even the people from the three major races couldn't help but gulp in nervousness. The pressure was so intense that no one dared to bat an eye or make a sound, fearful that they might alert the pythons of their presence. "Laquisha," Elena said in a quiet voice, her face turning as pale as a ghost. Although her voice was soft, the others threw sharp looks at her in frustration. Even Caden turned around and glared at her, his eyes blazing with fire and annoyance. Laquisha quickly covered her sister's mouth with her palm, silencing her. There were rumors that there were only 3 formless sky pythons in the entire Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, but it seemed there were more than 100 of them in this interior world. In the past, when Laquisha was aggressively chased by a formless sky python, the collapsing mountain race had to dispatch 3 people from their divinity hunt squad to chase it away. If they made a mistake and woke these giant formless sky pythons up now, then it would definitely mean a sure disaster for all the warriors present. Chapter 1538, Disturbed Minds. It was truly a good thing that the formless sky pythons lay motionless in deep slumber, like they were dead meat. Silence hung thick in the air as Caden's mouth moved and a strand of light blue life vitality spread out. "Everyone, try your best to not make any sound and follow me," he said. The Divine Refinement Forbidden Land was known to be a chaotic place since it did not have a strict structure. It was the definition of anarchy. Even then, the interior world was even more chaotic. This particular batch of formless sky pythons had never left the interior world. When these warriors entered it last time, however, they stayed in the depths of one of the interior world's mountain ranges instead of sleeping here. Caden and the others were shocked the first time they saw those formless sky pythons. Fortunately, the huge pythons were fast asleep, so as long as everyone was careful, the formless sky pythons would remain in slumber. Although such was the case, the fact that there were also so many other monsters pressured all of them. Thus, everyone tried their hardest to move slowly and quietly. Luckily, the warriors at present had long since mastered the control of their own bodies. The area was dipped in absolute silence, and not even the slightest sounds of footsteps were heard. But of course, they couldn't move fast enough while they maintained such a stealthy posture. It took them a while before they reached 10 miles. At that moment, no one still dared to speed up. After all, 10 miles was equivalent to just a single step for the formless sky pythons, and any noise they would have made could cost them their lives. At the same time, all of them felt slightly relieved. The further away they were from the beasts, the safer they would be. Boom! Suddenly, all of them felt the ground shake. The tremors in the ground were accompanied by a rumbling sound. All the colors in their faces were drained as they turned their heads to look back. Among the hundreds of slumbering pythons were 2 already awake formless sky pythons, which slowly rose up from their sleep. Their cylindrical heads were currently looking at the warriors. Meanwhile, Zen also turned around to look and suddenly frowned. Then, his gaze immediately landed on Laquisha. The two of them seemed to have realized something the moment they looked at each other. At the same time, Kenan, Chapman and the rest also understood. It looked like Laquisha seemed to attract the strange beasts. However, no one knew why it was the case. The reason Zen had been chased by a formless sky python when he had first arrived at the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land was because Laquisha had attracted it. Later on, she had even attracted the martial sacred beast, which chased after her as well. Chapman had known about it, but failed to realize it sooner. After all, the fact that Laquisha could attract the martial sacred beast did not mean that she could attract all the beasts. Yet, it was safe to say that right now, Laquisha most likely caused the sudden awakening of the formless sky pythons. Then again, now wasn't the time to think about why. Rumble, the 2 formless sky pythons straightened up, which made them look like a small mountain range. They blocked the light source above the cave and formed a huge wall that surrounded all the warriors. Go, just ignore it. Caden didn't understand why these 2 beasts still woke up despite the fact that they moved so carefully and managed to stay perfectly silent. The last time they passed by these formless sky pythons, someone had accidentally knocked over a huge rock, which fell on one of the huge beasts. However, they did not wake up at all. Today, this group of warriors had performed even better. Only the woman of the Han clan had casually said a few words, but other than that, they did not make even the slightest sound after. How did they awaken the formless sky pythons then? But it was clear that Caden couldn't investigate what really happened at the moment. He waved his hand and led the Skyland warriors to fly forward. On the other hand, the warriors from the Collapsing Mountain race, the Harmony race, the Divine Land and the other races ran behind the Skyland warriors like mad. Just then, one of the formless sky pythons had already opened its huge mouth and pounced towards them. Boom! The ground continued to shake with the heavy impact, and at that moment, the Collapsing Mountain warriors got caught in the midst of the chase. The huge snake-like beast fell over, and then the mountains and the earth shook violently with a heavy thud. While the formless sky python was a terrifying creature, it oddly wasn't able to do anything to the Collapsing Mountain warriors. There were a few muffled sounds, before the massive formless sky python suddenly fell to the side in front of everyone. Then, several members of the Collapsing Mountain race's Divinity Hunt squad finally took action. It could be said that while the formless sky python was terrifying in terms of pure strength, the Collapsing Mountain warriors were even more powerful. If there had been only 1 or 2 formless sky pythons in the place, the warriors of the Collapsing Mountain race would have attacked the beasts instead of escaping, and the ones that would be fleeing for their lives would be the formless sky pythons. The only thing was, they were faced with over 100 formless sky pythons this time. All the chaos and violence caused more and more formless sky pythons to wake up. The beasts discovered their targets and wasted no time in rushing towards the warriors. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone moved in their fastest speed that their bodies left lines behind in the nippy air. The Collapsing Mountain warriors might be able to restrain 1 or 2 formless sky pythons, but they could not defeat dozens of them. If the warriors were slow, they might even end up in the beasts' bellies. Boom! The second formless sky python suddenly twisted its body and launched itself forward once again with a loud crash. After about 10 seconds, everyone had already traveled several dozen miles. However, the formless sky python only moved slightly, but it had crossed a distance of over 100 miles. How could the warriors possibly escape from it? Hot air filled the area as the second formless sky python opened its annular mouth, which looked like a huge crater. The third formless sky python simply swept over from the side. The formless sky pythons clearly wanted to fight for the most delicious food, which was their only goal, Laquisha. More and more screams filled the air as the crowd continued to flee in panic. Zen was already standing on the spot. If he couldn't escape, he could only calmly choose to counterattack. However, it wasn't his turn to take action right now. "We fight with one heart." Tilton, the leader of the Harmony race, suddenly shouted. The 6 elite warriors of the Harmony race standing beside Tilton shouted at the same time, "We fight with one heart." They stretched out their hands and pressed them against their heads with their eyes closed. Suddenly, rays of golden light flashed above their heads for a moment. The rays of golden light immediately spiraled outwards, connected with each other, and then encircled Tilton. Disturb minds. When that was done, Tilton pressed his hand on his head as well. It was at that moment when his body began to emit a unique energy. The formless energy was invisible and colorless, but everyone present felt it. After that, all of them became increasingly anxious to the point that they wanted to tear everything around them to shreds. Even Zen was no exception. He felt as if his mind was in a state of panic and at the same, he had unleashed a brutal aura. Such a feeling was somewhat similar to when the malicious aura entered their bodies, but the two sensations were actually fundamentally different. While the malicious aura was only used to activate the warriors' ruthlessness and violence, this energy directly affected their minds and changed their original intentions. Now, this current energy that affected the soul and mind wasn't actually aimed at the warriors but at the 2 formless sky pythons. Yet, just a small trace of it was enough to make everyone panic. The moment the formless energy was poured into one of the formless sky pythons, the huge beast suddenly let out a strange howl. Then, it quickly changed its direction at the last moment and headed towards the other formless sky python instead. The other formless sky python didn't want to be defeated, as it also raised its head and started to fight back. The ground shook even more than what was possible as the 2 beasts engaged in a fierce battle. The warriors of the Harmony race don't seem strong, but they can directly control the formless sky pythons' minds. They are indeed extremely powerful, Zen exclaimed. Even he himself was surprised at the shocking turn of events. Such an advantageous attack enabled the warriors of the Harmony race to finally control the 2 formless sky pythons that charged at the front. But their small victory did not last. Hundreds of formless sky pythons behind them already rolled over. The onslaught of the multiple colossal monsters shook the ground even more violently, and the warriors felt like they were on the tidal waves which were constantly churning and rolling. The whole scene looked terrifying and impressive at the same time. All of them could only focus on one thing, and that was to rush forward. Caden of the Skyland race was the most familiar with the interior world, so everyone could only put their hopes on him and pray that he could lead them out of their current hellhole. Chapter 1539. The Disused 9 Stars. The team was guided into a straight line as the warriors raced to escape. Though the Skyland warriors were being led by Caden and they were at the front of the column, it didn't mean that they were any safer than the others. There was an array of strict rules and regulations in the interior world. A single false step could spell unimaginable trouble. The collapsing mountain race was in the middle of the group, while the Harmony race brought up the rear. Tilton, the leader of the Harmony race, stood in the back, controlling 2 formless sky pythons as the beasts were being attacked by their own kind. The collision of the mountainous pythons against each other created a crashing sound that rippled through the sky and sent shock waves that made people a little unsteady on their feet. Their attack was so violent and powerful that any weaker creature caught in their path would have instantly been torn to pieces. Tilton's strategy was quite effective. The formless sky pythons fighting among themselves in the back drastically slowed down their advancement towards the people. Naturally, this did not last forever as the ground at the back of the line suddenly caved in. Rumble. The earth cracked open with a thunderous rumble as an enormous formless sky python clawed its way out from deep within the ground. It was not only able to creep close to the ground, but also able to move fluidly beneath it. Unable to dodge it fast enough, the Harmony warriors disappeared into the mouth of the animal. One would have assumed that the inner world of such a huge beast would rightly reflect the grandeur of the creature, but this one would be quite cruel. There was no chance of surviving once inside. The formless sky python, after devouring a few Harmony warriors, was still unsatisfied. In a flash, its body folded over itself in midair and dove towards the group. All Tilton could do was change his target yet again. He placed both his hands on his head and focused his energy on the formless sky python charging towards them. But even when paired with the other 6 elite warriors of the Harmony race, he could only control 2 formless sky pythons at a time. Once he managed to gain control over the one in front of him, one of the other two in the fight regained its faculties and began to pursue the group. The enormous beasts had the strength and size of moving mountains. Their overwhelming power made everyone tremble with crippling fear, and everyone's heart sank collectively. The interior world was a mirror world. Everything was a reflection of another world, but the air was unsettling. The plain they were standing on was the size of the cold flame field they had crossed, except that it was not covered in ice. With their speed, in such an open area, they would never be able to ditch the formless sky pythons, they would only end up being crushed and devoured. Run, hurry up, they are catching up, how can we outrun them? They are too fast. Alas, I thought that I would be at least expanding my horizons, even if I didn't gain any fortune. I certainly did not expect to end up dying here today. Many of the warriors from the other races began to wail in grief. They had made great progress in the 3 sacred places. None of them had imagined that they would die here today. They were unready and unwilling to face this reality. Caden, who was leading the way, had a sullen face. The interior world was dangerous at every turn, but it wasn't the first time that they had ventured into this place. The many clansmen who had died in the past had shared their knowledge and experiences with them, helping them to avoid some deadly traps. Caden had been here many times before, yet he had never been in a situation as dangerous as this. It's our turn to bring up the rear. Chapman's muffled voice thundered. The eyes of the warriors from the Dragon Hunt squad revealed a sinister and imposing aura. The collapsing mountain warriors were the most famous hunters in the divine refinement forbidden land. They always hunted strange beasts, and now the stage had flipped and they were being hunted by them. There's no use, Chapman, said Caden. You can't fight off that many formless sky pythons. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, as if he were searching for something in the distance. This is hopeless. It seems that we will never be able to escape this anyway, Chapman replied. Then we should go back and fight. It's the only chance that we have for survival. Caden fell silent. He understood what Chapman was saying, but these creatures were incredibly fast, there was no possible way to outrun them. This was a losing situation, and Chapman's optimism for survival was even more unreliable. To fight more than 100 formless sky pythons was simply inviting death. Suddenly his eyes lit up, as he saw a black sphere slowly floating on one side of the field. It resembled a pure black star, completely absorbing all the light around it. Visually, it was absolutely mesmerizing. It did not reflect any light, giving the impression that there was nothing within the sphere. This is it, follow me, Caden exclaimed excitedly. The others did not understand, but since Caden knew this place better than anyone else, they followed without question and all turned around simultaneously. Zen and the Han clan had been shuffling in the middle of the group the entire time. Apart from keeping up closely with the group, they had nothing better to do. They also noticed the mysterious black ball. Everyone began to question the situation all at once. What's that? Are we going to charge in like this? Everyone, stop asking. Caden has led us here. We should trust that he has a way to get rid of the formless sky pythons, said Laquisha. She looked depressed, and knew that all their present troubles were all her fault. Since she had left her family, she discovered that regardless of where she went to, these unintelligent creatures always chased after her, as if her scent lured them in. This was bizarre. And she couldn't figure it out herself. Within 5 minutes, they had reached the black ball. Caden abruptly stopped right in front of it. Inside is another special world. It is connected to the other 8 balls in the interior world, he said in a firm and clear voice. It will take some time to get it opened. I will do my best to get it done. Then with a clap of his hands, waves of cyan life vitality formed and gently spread across the air, condensing and forming a huge cyan jade seal that covered the ball. 9 stars, Zen asked, his gaze frozen. Is this one of the 9 divine stars? The 9 divine stars were essential in the construction of the universe. The evolutionary universe in which he resided held countless stars, the majority of which were just a backdrop. The 9 divine stars were embedded in the constellations that illuminated the sky. They had existed for an eternity, and were the brightest in the northern, southern, eastern, western and middle sky regions. During his travels in the upper world, Zen did a superficial study of the stars, and did not delve too deeply into the 9 stars. When a grand era ended, many stars began to fall out of the sky, and new ones slowly rose. These 9 stars had never fallen before. They were the source of the holy being's strength. The situation in the divine refinement forbidden land was quite special. Holy J had stuffed his strength source into the collapsing mountain race's sacred spring mountain, leaving the 9 stars completely unused. At the very least, this was what Zen assumed. However, what he couldn't figure out was why Holy J would destroy his own 9 stars and move the strength source to the bottom of the sacred spring mountain. There's no time. The beasts are coming. Ah! Amidst a cacophony of screams, 3 formless sky pythons stretched and hurled themselves down from the sky. They instantly burrowed and disappeared into the ground, leaving behind 3 massive pits. Along with them, about 30 to 40 warriors also disappeared under the caved-in ground. It happened so suddenly that most did not even have the opportunity to scream or react before being swallowed completely. It would take some time to activate the black ball. When Kaiden's jade seal was imprinted on the ball, jade-green pattern continuously spread out along the black ball, but at the moment, even more formless sky pythons were rushing over. It was too late. Chapter 1540, Resistance. Over 100 formless sky pythons were moving towards them, like huge mountain ranges closing in. It was a horrible scene. The massive creatures surged forward. It was as if a chaotic world was pouring down at the warriors. What are you waiting for? Quickly now, run, there's no time left. We're waiting for death by staying here. Some of the martial artists from the other races couldn't endure the ordeal. How could they possibly be willing to wait and die? After bypassing the black sphere, they fled in all directions. Though they were well aware there were all kinds of dangers in this interior world, it was better to flee than wait for their impending doom. But most of the martial artists of the other races hadn't left, including Zen and the Han clan warriors. The 3 great races hadn't left either, placing their hopes on Kaiden. Let's go fight them, Chapman roared. Several collapsing mountain warriors of the Divinity Hunt squad shot out towards the formless sky pythons as they moved in closer. The collapsing mountain warriors that had managed to enter the Divinity Hunt squad were the race's strongest elites. Their power was beyond imagination. Dong, dong, under their combined efforts, they managed to strike the first python down to the ground. Follow me. As Chapman gave his order, he rushed to the bottom of the formless sky python that they struck down, placing both his shoulders under the scales of its midsection. It was an unbelievable sight. He actually wanted to lift the python on his own 2 shoulders. Chapman's body was much larger than that of ordinary humanoid creatures. But compared to the formless sky python, he was like an ant in front of an elephant. His move was rather astonishing. Apart from Chapman, the members of the Divinity Hunt squad joined in. With brutal force, the enormous formless sky python was lifted. It kept wriggling, struggling its way off the warrior's shoulders. In spite of its size, it couldn't get out of the tiny warrior's control. Throw it far out, Chapman ordered. All the Divinity Hunt squad warriors' veins popped out, and their muscles tensed, looking tougher than steel. In the past few years, they rarely met such dangerous situations in the collapsing mountain race, and rarely had they used their full strength to fight. But at this moment, they didn't have the luxury of holding back their strength in the slightest. As they exerted simultaneous effort, they forcibly threw the python out. The colossal creature then seemed like a log, rolling back towards its fellow pythons. Both sides carried an overwhelming amount of momentum. By throwing a formless sky python at an army of pythons, the several warriors indeed delayed them a bit. But in the face of the pythons' charge, the lone one they managed to throw out was completely smashed. Boom, boom, splash. After the python was broken into pieces, the blood from its body gushed like floodwater, splashing like a waterfall. The blood was probably enough to flood an entire continent. Being chased by so many of the pythons, the warriors present were scared out their wits, and their morale had lowered considerably. But the collapsing mountain race's counterattack produced strong momentum, giving everyone some hope. The Harmony race and Skyland race had also organized their strongest counterattacks. Led by Kennen, even the world lords of the Han clan attempted to contribute to the resistance. The combined efforts of hundreds of warriors formed a strong defensive line, potentially stopping the pythons. But their powers were too limited. The pythons weren't afraid of death. With the one goal to kill their enemies, the pythons rushed over. The line of defense lasted a mere moment until the formless sky pythons launched another attack. Are you done yet, Kaiden? Chapman was roaring. The nagging made Kaiden frown as he firmly pressed the jade seal onto the black sphere. More and more lines appeared on its surface, gradually spreading onto the sphere's entire surface. Almost, Kaiden shouted back. In his hand was the heavenly jade seal. It wasn't a genuine jade seal, but a sort of replica that Kaiden had made with his life vitality. 1,000 years ago, the first time he entered the interior world, he had wandered off from the other warriors of the Skyland race and accidentally stumbled into a cave. On a stone platform within, he discovered a picture, a contemplation picture. In the picture was the heavenly jade seal. Back then, Caden still felt excited, as though he had obtained some priceless treasure. So he kept the contemplation picture for himself. After a long period of contemplation, he managed to visualize the heavenly jade seal with life vitality. Over the next few hundred years, Caden continued pondering on how the jade seal could be used. The interior world served as the foundation of the divine refinement forbidden land. Caden believed that the heavenly jade seal contained great secrets. But after pondering for hundreds of years, he still failed to figure out anything. Only when he entered the interior world for the second time did he unravel this secret. The heavenly jade seal allowed him to enter any one of the 9 black spheres. But the solution to this mystery only led to more confusion. Once again, he searched for the cave atop a cliff somewhere in the interior world where he had found the contemplation picture before. After entering it again, he made his way to that very cliff, but there was no cave above it, it had completely disappeared. To find the cave, Caden almost shattered the cliff. But the cave was nowhere to be found, as if it had never even existed in the first place. With Caden's impeccable memory, it was impossible for the cave to have been an illusion. It definitely existed before, but it must have been tampered with. When he thought about it more carefully, more doubts grew within him. He first found the cave because of a beautiful white fox. Such a strange beast didn't exist in the divine refinement forbidden land, so Caden couldn't recognize the creature. Only after he used his own memories to condense the white fox's image with his life vitality did the divine land martial artists help him dispel his doubts and told him about the white fox. It was because he was chasing after the white fox that he accidentally fell off the cliff and landed on an ancient pine tree in the middle section of the cliff. Coincidentally, he chanced upon the cave and obtained the contemplation picture. In other words, someone had it all planned, leading him all the way there. The purpose behind it, Caden still had no idea. All he knew was that after activating the black spheres, he could travel freely among the 9 spheres. Only then did he discover that the 9 black spheres were connected to each other. But there was nothing inside them. After exploring all the spheres, Caden was left disappointed. He had such high expectations for them, hoping he would find some sort of inheritance within the spheres. But in the end, it was all false hope. Even the heavenly jade seal in his hand turned useless. Apart from being able to open up the black spheres, it seemed to have no other uses. Never did Caden expect to make use of the heavenly jade seal under such circumstances. Now, this black sphere was their last hope. But time was running out. Even though he was calm, more beads of sweat rolled down his temples. It wasn't something that could be rushed. All the warriors continued retreating, even Chapman looked fatigued. No matter how powerful the collapsing mountain race's strength was, it wasn't limitless. The Divinity Hunt Squad warriors' hands and legs were already shaking with exhaustion. The warriors from the collapsing mountain race had no choice but to retreat. How long will this take? Chapman roared again, if you don't open it soon, we're all finished. It was Caden's most critical moment. He focused all his energy into pouring life vitality into the black sphere, trying to speed it up. Soon, the Harmony race ended up retreating. The pressure weighing down on them was a huge psychological burden, slowly draining their energy. Having lost the support of the 2 great races, the Han clan had no choice but to retreat. And with that, the defensive line they had built so carefully had fallen apart. Rumble. Over 100 formless sky pythons raised their thick heads, ready to launch their strongest wave of attacks. At this moment, everyone was filled with despair. Even if they wanted to escape, they couldn't avoid the pythons' attack. Seeing the terrifying mouths come down on them, the warriors were struck with fear. It was said that within the body of a formless sky python lay a great space and no one could come out from it alive once they were devoured by the beasts. No one alive knew what the internal space of the formless sky python was like. And no one was really willing to go in and explore. But now, it seemed like they had no choice. Seeing the formless sky pythons lined up side by side, crushing down simultaneously, the warriors turned pale. It was like they could foresee their fate in the very next moment. LaQuisha's face fell. Subconsciously, she glanced at Zen, catching him as he spread out his arms. A strange scene followed. When all the pythons had made it halfway towards them, they suddenly stopped. Some kind of invisible force had blocked their path somehow. At least 40 formless sky pythons were piled up in front of the group. Such a large number of pythons pressing down had to be of tremendous weight. Their individual bodies were already unimaginably heavy, in addition to the powerful inertia and impact they brought along as they descended from the sky. Just how much strength was enough to block them?